Welcome everybody to the stream. Today we're going to have basically a round 2. This is going to be another installment of my previous video which I did talking about Amulet, which is called Demystifying Amulet Titan. And the idea for that video was to provide a resource that newer players can, use. They can go check it out, and then by doing so, I covered most of the basics of how the deck works, how to, what the reasons for deck buildings are, how the basic interaction works, basically Amulet plus Carulins or Bounce Lands, however you want to call them. Plus ramp spells in the form of, or ramp creatures, I guess, in the form of Azusa and Tribe Scout, also covered Explore. What basic lines look like in terms of, how to haste a Titan, how to chain multiple Titans, and stuff like that. The idea for today was to go a little bit deeper and to basically cover, in the past, I want to say year at this point, maybe it was a full year. The deck has gone through a lot of changes. And I mean, really a lot of changes. We started with like our basic list. This is like when the deck came back from like basically not seeing any play whatsoever to being a tier 3 deck maybe. There were, people like me that were playing these older lists. Then, as we should do, and this is something that I covered in the first video as well. It's very important for Amulet to adapt. Like you can take this list and you can do like reasonably well in any random event, regardless of the metagame and stuff like that, just because the core is so powerful. But if you really want to exploit and you want to take your win percentage, one step higher, and to get a consistent, hopefully 65-ish win percentage, you need to adapt. All the tools are there. All the tools are there in the colors that we're playing. It's just a matter of making sure that you know which tools those are and how to use them in the context of, the metagame that you expect. So this is, the very first idea. Then we experimented with adding Adventurous Impulse. And even this list won a Modern Open in the hands of Will Pulliam. This was like the first time that Amulet really was put on the spotlight, and people are like, okay, maybe this deck is actually more real than I think it is. What's up, Downright? So this was like the first interaction. Then humans became a thing. That's when we started experimenting with trying Hornet Queen in the main deck. Then we experimented with Serum Visions. Where is it? There we go. We experimented bringing back Serum Visions. Even Canister went all the way basically by adding like the full playset of Serum Visions, adapting the mana base with Botanical Sanctums and stuff. We actually tried splashing white, which was kind of weird in the beginning. And this is something that I pride myself of being the one that kind of like implemented it. But basically, Phoenix was printed and everybody was playing, the stupid Phoenix deck, which I hate. I still hate to this day that deck. Everybody was playing, they were playing Phoenix and Grixis Shadow. Like that was like the two best decks in the meta. And then I said, okay, why don't we revisit? This is something that I remember Daryl Ayers was the first one to do like 2 years ago, like a long time ago, and he was splashing Rest in Peace and Stony Silence in the sideboard, and I'm like, maybe that is not what we're interested in, but Path is actually very good. And then we tried going to a mostly white list, which ended up being the the standard list for a minute there. Then other adaptations took place, like I forgot to say Dom Harvey. Dom Harvey won an open with a Through the Breach list, which personally I don't like, but Through the Breach was a thing for a second there. And one thing that I did like a lot, like he was playing Swordtooth instead of Scouts, which I very much dislike. But he was adding a Coalition Relic, right? And this card was a card that I honestly did not know was modern legal. And when I saw it, I'm like, maybe there's something to this. And after testing it in the other shell, it came to the point where it was just very good consistently. Like all the time we were having good results with it, and I was constantly impressed, especially in the face of Blood Moon. So basically there are like a lot of changes kept happening, and new innovations were coming up, and more stuff was coming up. I'm trying to keep this one. Sorry, I didn't. How can I? I would appreciate if you keep it PG-13 downright. I don't know how to like. I don't want to ban you. That's the thing. Okay. Maybe if I time out, there we go. Don't take it as an aggression. It's just I don't know how to cancel. I don't know how to like delete that comment. So please don't take it as a. I'm not banning you. It's just I have no idea how to delete the comment. But if I could, I would just delete this comment, and I would appreciate if you if you slow down the cursing for a second. So basically, I wanted to start from the beginning, and again, if you are not familiar with the basic interactions, I talk about in my first video. I talk about sequencing. I talk about when to lead on steerings, amulets, Straggler Tribe Scout, how to use Explore, how to use Azusa. How to use prime time in terms of like how to in the order in which you should fetch your lands. All that stuff is covered in my first video, so I will not go through that because it doesn't really make much sense for me to repeat myself. But what I'm going to go over though is the innovations. Okay, what you want for example? Oh, thank you, the toast. I appreciate it. So I want to go over all the innovations, all the different cards that were added. Why were those cards added, in which context they will shine, and when you should like try to think of these cards if you want to move your list forward. Like the fact that we haven't played Explore in a while does not mean that Explore is unplayable now, right? Explore has a reason. Explore has a metagame in which is great, and it also has some matchups where it's terrible. Like right now in the current metagame, where everybody is trying to kill you, on turn 2 or 3, this is not what you want to be doing. However, if for whatever reason something mysterious happened, and like let's say that blue, white, and black, green are the 2 best decks in the format, somehow, the Toast 77 with that tier 1 subscription. Welcome to the Primetime Stronghold. Thank you so much for the support. Really appreciate it. Get some primetime hype in there. Let's say that black, green, and blue, white are incredible in the metagame, and they're like the 2 best decks, and they represent 20% of the metagame, or 30% of the metagame, or something absurd. It's never going to happen, but just let's use this as an example, just to prove the point. If that were to happen, then Explore all of a sudden becomes a premium card, because that's when Explore really shines. When you have a metagame filled with fair decks, well placed now the point is valid. Yeah, I'm just trying to prove the point. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So all of this stuff that we are, not really doing anymore, it's not necessarily because it's bad. It's not that it just became bad randomly. It's just a matter of metagame choices. Carbo Cantrips, thank you so much for that. Tier 1 subscription. Welcome back for the 3rd month in a row. It is. Time flies by, huh? Time flies by for real. So So yeah, so let's go over that stuff, and you know, this is like a good place to start. So the shell will basically remain unchanged. We will have 4 Primeval Titans. We will have 4 Azusa. Oh, nice, Cardboard Country. I really appreciate the cheer. Thank you so much. We will have 4 Azusa. This is a must. This is a must. And this is a must. Okay? I've seen people shaving on the 4th Summoner's Pact, and I don't agree with that at all. Granted, this is because they have been playing Oath of Nissa, I think, or Adventurous. I think it's Oath of Nissa. So that's why they are shaving on Summoner's Pact. I don't think I ever want to play less than 4 Summoner's Pact. We're playing virtually 11 copies of Primeval Titan. I don't think I want to play any less. So that is Delirious Wave. We will get there. I just wait. Don't worry about it. So that is going to be the core of the deck. Okay, that is basically never going to change. All of these cards will be 4-off and should be 4-offs. Then same thing with the lands. This will be 4-offs. This will be 4-off. This will be at least a 3-off, maybe 2, maybe 4, but you're gonna have at least a couple of them. You will have one of this. You will have one of these and one of these, or one Cassie Warfront. So all of these cards will be the core, and they will never change. However, the things that happen around those cards might change. I just explained the reasoning for Explore, for example. This is a card that you always want to be aware of in a fair metagame. If you expect a lot of black-green, blue-white, Mardu Pyromancer, I don't even know which fair decks exist in Modern at this point. It's not that many. But yeah, then you want to see Explore, okay? Then you definitely want to try to revisit Explore. Let's go to a little bit of the next step list. This is what happened afterwards. We started experimenting with Adventurous Impulse. This was a card that... the idea behind this was that we had a cantrip that it could be a land in the early game, right? Which would allow us, one of the things that we cut was an extra land. So you see that we're playing 27 instead of 28. So the cantrip would allow us to cut a land and still regain, you know, that land drop consistency. We should be able to reliably hit our land drops with access to 7 cantrips. And in the late game, it could help us get closer to our prime time. That didn't stop being true. It's just that I think that other things happen, basically, like what I'm going to get into, like the discovery of Coalition Relic and stuff like that, which made Adventurous Impulse a little bit obsolete. I'm not sure that I will want to go back to this card. Licky Bomb Hole. This is like a history stream. I'm explaining. That's why it's called Demystifying Amulet Titan. I made a video called Demystifying Amulet Titan where I explain like all the basics of the deck. You can find it on YouTube. And this is like the second part where I'm going over changes and stuff like that. So that is the reason why I don't think that Impulse will be coming back. There's just like other stuff that happened. Humans became a very popular deck, another thing that really hurt this idea, because Thalia, you know, if you need to pay 2 for Adventurous Impulse, then it's not so good. So when humans became like one of the top tier decks in the format, it made Adventurous Impulse basically bad, like straight up bad. Same thing with Explorer. So that is the reason why I don't really see Adventurous Impulse coming back. And if it does, the pros over Oath of Nissa, which is basically the same card, right? The pros over Oath of Nissa would be that this is an enchantment, which would grow with Tarmogoyf if this were to be discarded, or if you drew a second copy or something like that. But that is the main reason to run Impulse over Oath of Nissa. And Impulse has the advantage of Oath of Nissa has the advantage of not being countered by Mausoleum Wanderer and not being discarded by Collective Brutality. So those were the reasons. Also, Oath of Nissa, if you have multiples of them, it makes your Emrakul a little bit easier to cast. So I just wanted to real quick go over like the differences between those two, because if you would to consider them, also if you're playing Karn, this is strictly better, right? Because it can also find your Karn. So I wanted to go over the differences, so in case that you want to like revisit this, you know that this is also an option. All right. So what happened after this is we started splashing white. There we go. We started splashing white, and when we started splashing white, of course, we adapted the mana base, okay? We added 4 Celestial Sanctuary and Kabira Crossroads over Radiant Fountain. And the reason for this was, again, because the metagame was infested with Grixis Shadow and the Phoenix deck. Those were the 2 main reasons to be playing Path to Exile in the sideboard. Of course, I experimented with Stony Silence and Rest in Peace as well, the idea being that those would be pretty good against the Hardened Scales deck, which was also a newcomer into the metagame. And it was fine in terms of like the Rest in Peace and the Stony Silence doing a little bit against Hardened Scales. The issue that I ran into was that my opponents were bringing in 4 Nature's Claims anyway, so that's why that plan didn't really work. However, the Path to Exiles were still very, very good. And this became like the main splash color for, I don't know how long, but it was definitely multiple months. Yeah, don't worry about it, Dan, right? It was just like, sorry, I just wanted to delete the message and I had no idea how to do it, so I apologize for that. But that is, so I was hoping that you would take no offense in that. That is why we started splashing white, and that's why in this list you don't see any Rest in Peace or Stony Silences, because it wasn't worth it to go that route. But Path to Exile was definitely worth it, and I started having a lot of success with this. With this list. Another thing that happened is, as I was saying earlier, the addition of Coalition Relic. This card was kind of a game changer for me. I was consistently impressed by this card. I went over the bridge list, that this was the main thing that changed basically I started. It put Coalition Relic in the map for me, basically. So this is the bridge list. I guess we should go over the bridge list real quick before we continue moving on, since again this was the inspiration for that. The bridge list has Through the Bridge, of course. It played Emrakul, which personally I don't like at all. It has like the added benefit of being pretty good against mill, but yeah, that is the idea. So. Licky Bomb. We're going over the lists. I do like the questions, but it's one of those things that we will get there. There's basically there was, I don't know which list you're talking about. Maybe it was the white list. There should have been a cavern, and there is a cavern here too. I think Dominic was not playing a cavern. But I think in the Through the Bridge list, just as in any other list, you should play caverns. Through the Bridge is very, very good in a couple of situations. Through the Bridge is very good against Blood Moon, obviously, because we can cast it Through the Bridge even with a Blood Moon in play. Through the Bridge is also very good against counter spells, because you can breach either a Titan, or if you're playing Emrakul, then you can breach the Emrakul end of turn, then you untap, and then you can attack, of course. And the nice thing is that if you breach at end of turn, you're forcing your opponent to react to you, because maybe they cannot interact with the threat that you're playing. So you're forcing them to use their counter magic on their end step, and you tap them out, and you force them to use a counter counter card, I guess, and then you can untap and you can just hard cast your threat. So it's very, very good against counter magic, and it's also quicker. It's also faster, right? Like the fact that we can get to 5 mana, it's just one less than 6, basically. It's just basic math. And it's a little bit faster. However, what this had was the issue that you would run into a lot of clunkier hands, right? Because now you're playing 4 copies of a card, which does absolutely nothing by itself. Like, this card just doesn't do anything by itself. You need the other piece in order to combo off. And now you have. I will revisit this when we talk about why I don't like Leyline of the Void in Amulet. But basically, the cost of playing through the breach and the cost of having cards that don't do anything by themselves is very, very, very high in this deck. One thing is, like, for example, we're playing 4 copies of Azusa, and redundant Azusas is, of course, basically a dead card. However, the first copy of Azusa, it's so good for us that we want to make sure that we have access to that first copy of Azusa basically every single game. And I am willing, like, I would always rather draw 2 Azusas than not draw any Azusa, if that makes sense. So that's why we're risking running multiple Azusas. But having access to, like, if you draw 2 through the breaches and you didn't draw a single Titan, you now have 2 dead cards that didn't really do anything for you. So that is why I don't think that this list. I personally don't like this list. However, again, there is a metagame for this list. You want to exploit what I was saying, control decks. Through the breach is very good against other really fast decks because it makes your decks faster. Again, the downside is the loss in consistency, especially if you're also playing Emrakul, the Ion Storm, Eons, however you say that. If you're also playing Emrakul, now you have even more copies of cards that don't really do anything by themselves. Except you can sometimes hardcast Emrakul in the very late game against blue-white after you've resolved a couple of prime times. It's kind of hilarious. It's pretty awesome. But it's not very common at all. So that is something to think about with the Through the Breach version. And if you look at this, I was playing Worldspine Worm. The reason for this is I wanted one card that you could bridge in just like you do with Emrakul. Except that you can actually pact for this. So again, something like black-green or stuff like that, you can pact for a Worldspine Worm and like breach it, and now you are, you have like you swing for 15 and you are left with 3 5/5s, which your opponent will have a lot of trouble dealing with. So those are like the pros and cons of this. Again, the beautiful thing that Dom Harvey did was it showed the fact that Coalition Relic was a legal card in Modern. So after his win at the Open, I started testing the card Coalition Relic, and let's go back to this list. After I was aware that Coalition Relic was a card, I started playing it and I started having a lot of success with it. I thought that it was very, very good, and it did a lot of what the deck wants to do, especially in a moment in time where everybody was playing Blood Moon, because again everybody was playing Phoenix, and having access to a colorless way to get double blue in order to transmute or double green in order to cast your Primeval Titan was huge. Also, Coalition Relic is a piece of ramp that you can steerings for. This was also very, very interesting. And it's also something that, it really helped Coalition Relics, really brought Coalition Relics stock high for me. I think this card is excellent in Amulet, and yeah, it's just very, very good. As you can see, these cards have taken the places of where we used to have Explore. Summoning Trap. Yeah, so that card it has the same issue as Through the Breach. It's just like, it's not really that good in a deck where we only have 4 threats. Right? We only, like, if you summon in Trap end of turn, and your opponent says, okay, resolves, and then you don't find a prime time and you find like a Walking Ballista or an Azusa or a Scout, you're gonna be really sad. So that's why I remise. And Summoning Trap is not very good in this deck. For those unaware, Summoning Trap is this card. You look at the top 7 cards of your library and you put a creature card from those 7 cards, and you put it into play. But yeah, we only have 4 threats that we want to trap into, so it's not very good. All right, Trinket Mage. This was another innovation by I think Edgar was one of the first to start using Trinket Mage. Trinket Mage was a card that was used way back when. So after Summer Bloom got banned, in fact, I think even before that, like when the Summer Bloom lists were not very tuned, they used to have like 1 or 2 Trinket Mages hanging out there. And the beauty of Trinket Mage is that it can get Amulet of Vigor and Engineered Explosives. Ballista had not been printed back then, so this was not a consideration. So this was way back in the day, and Trinket Mage was used as an extra way to get your Amulet and an extra way of getting Engineered Explosives. This was, of course, all nice and everything, but then people started actually polishing the Summer Bloom deck, and they turned it into, well, a broken deck. So Trinket Mage kind of disappeared. Then they banned Summer Bloom, and Trinket Mage came back with the Lotus Bloom version, right? Because Trinket Mage can go find Lotus Bloom, which is another piece of ramp. However, this means that you are on turn 3, and then you're going to get Lotus Bloom, and you're only gonna get up to you're only gonna get the mana boost from Lotus Bloom on turn 6. At that point, you're probably dead. It was not great. It was abandoned. But years later, again, Humans is the top deck in the format, and I don't know if it were, I guess it probably was. It probably was the fact that it was one of those guys, Edgar. They're like those guys that used to play Amulet and just break it all the time. Summer Bloom was printed a long time ago. What card made it OP? It was not a card that made it OP. It was people started taking the deck. People started taking the deck seriously, and they started actually putting time into it and trying to break it, and they did. So it was not really like a thing that there was a printing that made the deck broken. It was the hive mind just actually saying, okay, maybe there's something actually good here, and started experimenting, started polishing the deck, taking the bad cards out, using better cards, and then eventually that's they found a shell that was actually broken and it had to be banned. One of the very big innovations they got into that was the fact that the list that took second at the Pro Tour, and the way that Justin Cohen and Sam Black brought Hornet Queen and Wurmcoil Engine to the sideboard in order to make the black-green matchup good instead of terrible. That was a very, very major innovation that definitely put... I think that was one of the innovations that made the deck actually broken. But yeah, so talking about Trinket Mage, Humans became a busted deck, right? Humans becomes one of the best decks in the format, and people start looking at Trinket Mage again, which had been forgotten, but now the printing of Walking Ballista, a card that, by the way, we are already playing, and now we realize that Trinket Mage can actually get Ballista as well. So Trinket Mage turns not only into a way to make your combo faster, meaning you can, if you need to go for a combo hand, you can go fetch your Amulet of Vigor, but it becomes a way to find interaction, so you can go fetch your Engineered Explosive, and it also becomes a threat. Okay, that is the reason why Trinket Mage comes back. And then now we have, now it's actually very, very good. In fact, it got to a point where I think Edgar was playing like 3 Trinket Mages in the main deck, which then we're going to talk about why we stopped doing that. But Trinket Mage becomes a very, very good card and a significantly playable card because it gives us access to so many options. Are we gonna talk about the dinosaur at some point? We can if you want to. I'm going through like kind of like the evolution of the deck a little bit here, and then we will go over individual cards if people are interested in that. So that's why Trinket Mage starts showing up again, and it's actually quite good. It does a lot of work, and it helps a lot in the humans matchup specifically. Either speeding you up, giving you multiple ways of killing Meddling Mage. So if the Meddling Mage explodes, you can go with Ballista to kill it, or vice versa. But yeah, so that's why and how Trinket Mage makes an appearance. After Trinket Mage, oh yeah, this is also something that happened. Let's talk about this list, which Matthew Deluxe topated and open with. Let's go over this real quick. This is Primal Command makes an appearance. This is a card that had been around for a really long time, but it was kind of like nowhere to be found anywhere, basically. This card is sweet. It's basically like an extra threat, because we can use it to go find Primetime. We can put a land on top of the deck, which can be pretty good in some matchups. It gains life against something like burn or stuff. And the main reason it's because at this point in time, Dredge is very, very good. So that's why, shuffling your opponent's graveyard, it's actually a very, very relevant mode. So that's why we see the appearance of Primal Command. Another fun off that you will see here in the sideboard is the card Tragic Arrogance, and the reasoning for this was the Wurmcoil deck. The Wurmcoil deck was actually a terrible matchup. And this card is very, very good against that deck. It allows you to basically leave your opponent with a Mox Opal where you keep your Primetime, basically. And they have to sacrifice everything else. So that was pretty sweet. That was another cool innovation. It also had the side effect of being good against humans, Eldrazi decks, stuff like that. So Tragic Arrogance was actually a nice card that it's always good to know that it exists. I keep saying, like, there's a lot of cards that just come and go, but it's always interesting to be aware of why they are there, so you can bring them back if you need to. So this happened, then Serum Visions happened. Where is Serum Visions? Actually, I think this happened at the same time as Serum Visions happened. Yeah, there we go. So, Hive Mind makes a resurgence. For those of you that are not aware, Hive Mind is here as a very hard to interact win condition. Hive Mind is it combos with your pacts, basically. Okay, if you have a Hive Mind in play, you cast your pact. And Hive Mind is not a May, so the other person will get a copy of your pact. And then ideally what you would want to happen is you cast Hive Mind, you immediately play your pact, and then your opponent needs to pay for the pact on their upkeep, and they don't have the mana to pay for it, so they lose the game. So that is the idea for Hive Mind. Hive Mind is extremely good against control. It can help you win games that you have no business winning. So it was very good there. Very good against Tron. Very good against Tron. And a bunch of decks just get cheesed out by Hive Mind. Hive Mind is not very good against any deck that can pay for Summoner's Pact. This is the pack that you're going to be using the most when you use Hive Mind. You're mostly going to be using Summoner's Pact. So if you're playing against like a devoted Druid deck or something like that, and you cast Hive Mind and you cast Summoner's Pact, they tutor and then they pay for the pact and upkeep, and then you did nothing. So it's not very good there, but it has its spots. Hive Mind also made a resurgence in a moment where we are trying to be a little bit more combo centric. Okay. So, like I always say, Amulet is not a combo deck, but that doesn't mean that Amulet cannot be a combo deck. It's all because of how you build your deck. And during this time, people are experimenting with that. In fact, Canister tries to go all in on this concept, and he tries to be as a combo deck as possible. As you can see, there's no even explosives in this list. There's just no basically no interaction whatsoever besides Slaughter Pact. The idea is to try to go all in the combo deck aspect and try to see if we can get there by being a good combo deck. I don't think. I mean, this idea was tried, and I don't think it was very good. Basically, Serum Visions, even though it's a great card, has a very, very high cost. And the very high cost that you're paying to play Serum Visions is in your mana. In order to have access to untapped blue, you need to play lands that are not necessarily bad, right? Like, I would love to have access to Botanical Sanctum in basically every single one of my Amulet builds, right? The issue comes with, you cannot just play 32 lands, because then you would flood basically every single game. So what you want to do is you want to take out some of your one-off lands in order, like your utility lands, in order to make room for this. So what we're doing is we are, in this case, the utility lands that are missing are Ghost Quarter, that's one. Cavern of Souls is another one. There's no Cavern in this list in the main deck. And the fourth forest is not here. And the last land... Yeah, it's just a bounce land. We're only playing one Rot Farm, one Gruul Turf, one Sanctuary. So we're only playing 3 bounce lands. So that's the other one. So in order to make room for Serum Vision, some concessions need to be made. And those concessions are in your mana base. Which otherwise, if we look at one of today's lists, you see that we have a bunch of utility lands. So that is the cost that you're paying. However, that was the experiment that Canister was working with. I think he abandoned it at some point, but that was the idea. And as you can see, he even goes in with the Slaughter Pact in order to give you another pact. So if your opponent is playing like blue-green or blue-red, whatever, green-red, whatever, you can still like Slaughter Pact and kill them, by doing that. So yeah, we cover Serum Visions, we cover Hive Mind. Of course, if anybody has any questions in chat, feel free to throw them in there. One thing I want to point out, while all of this happens with the scout lists and all of this innovation is going on, the Amulet Bloom lists don't change whatsoever. This list, which is mostly played by, I know 2 people that play this list, and that is the creator of the deck, Pond & Wine, and Austin Robbins. Those are the 2 guys that have had a lot of success with this list, and the ones that have been championing it for years, literally. And they make some changes and then go back on them. And then they make some improvements, and then the immediate next improvement is to undo all the improvements they made. It's pretty hilarious. But yeah, so basically the only change from like a list from a year ago is that we are playing 1 less land, and I don't know what was... Oh, the 3rd Serum Visions for a Coalition Relic. This is a change that Nick made. Nick is Pond & Wine, by the way. This is a change that Nick made, and I think he went back on that change, and he undid everything. And then he was splashing Thoughtseize at one point. So yeah, those were some changes that happened, and then were undone. They were undone immediately after. All right, sounds good, Dan. Right? I appreciate it. So then what happens? We talk about Serum Visions, we talk about Tragic Arrogance and Primal Command, we talk about Hive Mind, Impulse, Breach, Oh yeah, some people are splashing black. That is something that I skipped. This actually happened a little bit earlier. This is when KCI was. This is when KCI was the best deck in the format. Yeah, I think we covered the lists with Hive Mind and no Serum Visions. I might be wrong though. Let's go over this real quick. This happened when KCI was the best deck in the format. Phoenix is still a deck, but KCI is just better, basically. So so what the people are doing is they're splashing black for Cranial Extraction slash Memoricide. These are basically the same thing. Edgar thinks that Cranial Extraction is the correct card to be playing, so you can have your Kamigawa block tribal deck complete. Which I thought that was hilarious. But yeah, Memoricide is basically the exact same card, so it doesn't matter. So we are going up to 29 lands. Oh, this is actually that happened at some point as well. We're playing Sky Shroud Ranger in the flex slot. This is before Coalition Relic. This is before Coalition Relic actually. So this is something that I skipped. I totally forgot about this guy. Basically, the idea here is that we want to go higher on ramp. So we're playing a bad version of a Sakura Tribe Scout. And in order to make sure that we hit our land drops, because, you know, with this shell, we want to hit our land drops 100% of the time, we're going up on a land. So you see that we're playing 29 lands. I tried this out, and personally, I kind of loved playing 29 lands. If I could, I would always play 29 lands, honestly. But it's, you know, it's sometimes awkward, and sometimes something has to give, basically. But yeah, so we're splashing black for Memoricide in the sideboard, and we're making the switch of Path to Exile to Assassin's Trophy, which also was a very newly printed card at the moment. And these greed monsters were also splashing Runic Thar. Because, again, KCI is the best deck in the format, so we're splashing Runic Thar off of a single grove of the Burn Willows. And, well, I guess you have Boros Garrison, Cavern of Souls, and 4 Gemstone Mine. This is, like, personally, I think this was, like, egregiously greedy. Like, only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 red sources for Runic. I think it's crazy greedy, but, you know, I guess it worked out for some people. So yeah, so that's why we're running Runic. Storm is still a deck. KCI is the best deck in the format. Runic is very, very good against both decks, and that's why we see it. Then nowadays we don't really see Runic anymore because, well, KCI got banned, and Storm is not really a deck that much anymore. Sorry, I had one of those like sneezes that comes but doesn't happen. Terrible. Awful feeling. But yeah, so that is, you know, a little side note on Runic Thar. As you can see, we're playing, this is back when Trinket Mage was in all of its glory, getting your interaction and your amulets. So yeah, I definitely wanted to cover this. Assassin's Trophy had Phoenix was still a deck, and Assassin's Trophy has the upside of destroying Blood Moon, which is not a minor feature for this list. However, it's of course significantly worse against the card Arclight Phoenix itself, because it doesn't exile the card, but it just destroys it. So that is also a consideration. And again, all the stuff that I'm talking through, again, I just want to stress this. These are always viable options. The fact that we are not playing these cards right now does not mean that you cannot, if you have an expected metagame that is playing like a ton of, you know, Tron, like Assassin's Trophy is very good against Tron, Assassin's Trophy is very good against Blood Moon, as I just said. It's very good against Black-Green X because it can destroy both Tarmogoyfs and Planeswalkers. So this is always a possibility. This is always a possibility. Never forget that you know, these cards are always an option for you. The fact that there are so many viable options is part of why there's so much. Yeah, exactly, precisely. There's always things that you can go back for. Like Slaughter Pact is insane against stuff like Infect and things like that, you know. Always be aware of the existence of these cards. Then if you want to if you want to play them or not, that's always like a decision that you make week to week. But these cards are always viable, and they have a reason. So after we finish with with this stripped down memory lane, we're almost done, by the way. Then we're going to go over like specific cards. So then we come to War of Devastation, and this card gets printed. The very first thing that I do is I try it out kind of as a meme at first. I wasn't very sure about it. I try a list with 3 Karns, or 2, I think it was 2 Karns if I'm not mistaken when I just started. Yeah, this one. This is basically like my previous video, like the Demystifying Amulet Titan. This would be the part 2. So card gets printed, and we the idea to play it in an Amulet shell makes sense to an extent, but I'm a little bit hesitant. However, for the memes or whatever, I decide to give it a shot. I start with a list which is based off of the white splash. Death Lighter, thank you for the follow. Oh, I started on 2. Well, thank you, Dark Reaper. So I started with 2 Karns, and this I think was with a white splash if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. So I grabbed just the regular Amulet shell, and then we throw 2 Karns in there in place of the Hive Minds. Yeah, this is at a point where Hive Mind is the way to go in Amulet. And we take out the 2 Hive Minds, and we just throw in 2 Karns, and then we build the Karn Wishboard. As you can see, we have access to Tormod's Crypt. I really wanted to try out Pithing Needle, which is something that I was consistently impressed by. Crucible instead of Ramming Up Excavator, which was the card that we were playing. Of course, we're playing a Lattice because, might as well. We're playing, somebody said, this was not in my initial sideboard, it is got added later, Wurmcoil Engine. In the initial sideboard we definitely had explosives, we had the Ballista in the sideboard, we had Liquidmetal Coating, we had Trinisphere, we also tried Ensnaring Bridge. We realized that Ensnaring Bridge was not good because we really struggled to get the cards out of their hands, so we tried Silent Arbiter. What else did we try? We tried a lot of things in the Karn Wishboard, and slowly but surely through testing, Chalice, we tried Chalice too. Through testing, we were realizing which cards were being good and which cards were not. So I started with 2 Karns, and I was consistently impressed by it. I went up to 3, and then I finally went all the way up to 4. Silverskin Replica, yeah, that's a good catch. We also tried Silverskin Replica, which is kind of hilarious. Yeah, close enough. It's Silverskin with a Y. So we tried a bunch of different cards, and I keep going up on Karn because I'm constantly impressed by the card, and it's just very, very, very good in all the matchups that I play. Also, we start experimenting then in some matchup like humans and stuff like that. We start in all the aggro matchups. We start sideboarding them out. We try new things. Like I am very impressed by Wurmcoil Engine in the sideboard, because in the black-green matchup you want to like play Karn, and it's not very likely that he will survive. So you want to immediately -2 to get your value play. We realize that Liquidmetal Coating is not really what we want to be playing. Some play patterns get constantly repeated, like a lot of times I just play Karn against Storm, Dredge, and stuff like that, and I immediately go get Tormod's Crypt, and it's great. Against like blue-white, against Tron, against decks like that, I play Karn and immediately go get Pithing Needle. So there's some like, I realize that there are some play patterns that happen over and over and over again, so those cards become a staple in my sideboards, while some other cards get disregarded. But this is all through testing. If you really want to like dig into this, all of my streams are uploaded in my YouTube channel. So if you want to see like how the whole Karn testing happened, you can go back like 2 months ago or something when the card got originally printed, and you can see like the whole evolution of the archetype and what things get played and everything. Then we even experiment with just basically playing a straight up. This was a very cool experiment. This is like a straight up blue-green version of Amulet, basically. Because our removal spell becomes Dismember instead of Path to Exile. And what this does, it allows for the 4th basic forest, and it allows for a Radiant Fountain. This was like the main idea, is that since we're playing 4 Karns, it's increasingly important for us to play an untapped source on turn 4 to just cast the Karn. And this is actually, it's not bad. I go back to white because, you know, Phoenix and all that stuff, all that good stuff, but this is not necessarily bad. It's just like the fact that some matchups get much worse. Like your aggro matchups are just terrible now because your removal spell costs you 4 life, which is a huge cost against burn, and this list is already weaker to burn than your regular, you know, like Highman list, because Karn is not very good against burn. So it's just like some matchups just become very bad, and I just abandon this list, and I go back to the white splash. But yeah, it's very cool to see like how many things have changed. Honestly, even now that I'm going through like all the stuff that we went through, it's kind of cool to see how much everything evolved. This is me trying. This card, so bad. This is a list that tries the slot, and because we're playing the slot, you definitely want to, you know, play a 29th land, and the 29th land that I wanted to try was Blast Zone. This was a card that was actually not terrible, but it was a little bit awkward though. It was definitely not bad though. I think that Blast Zone is definitely a card that you should have in your radar in case something like Humans becomes again like the best deck in the format. Maybe after they ban Hogak, Humans becomes the best deck again, and then Blast Zone becomes a very real consideration again, because it's a way to blow up their dudes, even that they cannot Meddling Mage. And like explosives, the only issue with Blast Zone was that it is very slow. Because you fetch it with Titan, and now your opponent knows that it's coming, because you will rarely want to blow it up on 1. You are going to mostly blow it up on 2 and sometimes 3. So that means that at least 2 turns need to go by before you're able to do that, unless you have a double Amulet draw. But if you have a double Amulet draw and you result in a prime time, like, you're probably already winning anyway. So I've unfortunately sold my soul to the slot. He managed to win me 2 games. I keep him in my back pocket because of it, but it's still pretty maybe. Yeah, I think it's very bad. I know the situations where it could be good. I know the situations where it could be very good. I do agree with that. The thing is that I played, I think, 40 or 45 matches. Like I played a lot with the slot, both as a 4-off, which I think you should not ever under any circumstances play the slot as a 4-off, even if you're going up to 29 lands, which you should if you're doing it. But I really don't like the slot as a 4-off. The slot is not a replacement to Scout. I don't think that's the correct way to see it. If anything, the slot is something to play besides the Scout. In my experience, it has consistently been worse than Coalition Relic though. And if it's consistently worse than Coalition Relic, then why are we playing it, right? So, yeah, no, I know that I was answering Snaggle tracks, but yeah, Blast Zone is insane against Boggles. However, our entire deck is insane against Boggles, so I would not really think of Blast Zone. Blast Zone is very good against Death Shadow, though. That is something to note. I was able to, like, my opponent had Stubborn Denial in hand, and I remember I stared, and my opponent did not stop it with 2 shadows in play, and I found the Blast Zone, played it, and cracked it, and destroyed both of their shadows. It was sick. So it's very good in some matchups. It's extremely good, but it's like again, in this situation, it is indeed the 29th land. So if you were to cut a land from here, it would be the blast zone. So that is the Karn situation. We also go back to red. This is something that happened actually not so long ago. We're just playing Karn with by splashing red because humans becomes very good again. So we want to have access to Fire Spout and a Braid. A Braid, of course, having the upside of not only killing Meddling Mage, but also destroying Damping Sphere, which is a huge card in that matchup because it's one of their ways that they can slow us down, pretty roughly. Scalpers of Summon gets you 5 mana on turn 2, being able to pack for slot gets you to 6. They are like the only... Yeah, there's like very narrow situations, Santelmo, for the slot to be good. And I had 0 of those situations come up for me in my again, it was like 45 matches of testing, which granted, it's not that much. It's a small sample size, but in that small sample size, the situations where slot is good came up, I think, 1 time, and there's the situations where slot was terrible came up at least 5 or 6 times. So I was very unimpressed with the slot, and I think in the balance of things, it's not good. But that is just my opinion. I know that there's some people that are having success with it. In fact, there's this player in Magic Online that just like does very well in like challenges and stuff, and they often play lists with multiple slots. Which is like, to each their own. If it works for people, the slot just doesn't work for me. But yeah, I guess it's a good card to have, like, to know that, to be aware of, which is, I don't know. I honestly don't know in the matchups where slot is good. I don't really see it as a meta card. Anyway. This brings us back to the 2 lists that I have been thinking of currently. This is a list with Rest in Peace. Okay, this is a Karn list with which plays Rest in Peace in the sideboard. This card being here is solely because of Hogak. The Hogak matchup for Amulet is not very good. So Rest in Peace is my attempt to try to help that matchup a little bit. Of course, we have Tormoscript, we have Karn, and this is more of an evolved Mom's Basement Streams. Thank you for the raid, I appreciate it. So this is one of the... This is after, months of developing the Karn list, right? So we are down to 3 Karns, we're not up to 4, because the meta became like slightly hostile towards Karn with all those aggro decks. And if you look at my sideboard guide, which is for subscribers, by the way, just want to point that out. If you look at the sideboard guide that I wrote, that I published on Monday, you will see that there's plenty of matchups where Karn gets sideboarded out. And that is fine. Karn has his pros and cons. And it has some matchups where it's incredible and some matchups where it's not very good. So it's possible to side it out. In fact, that is one thing that it's relevant. Oh, thank you for the follow. And yeah, I appreciate the raid. Thank you so much. And yeah, it's a sweet deck. So the ballista came back to the main deck because of humans. Being able to transmute for Ballista, it's more relevant or just naturally drawing it, I guess. It's more relevant than being able to Karn for it, and you can always Karn for your other copy of Explosives. We're playing 2 copies of Explosives in the main deck. Again, we're really afraid against humans. Explosives is also good against Hogak because you can swipe all of their tokens for just 2 mana, and of course, being able to transmute for it is great. And we only have the survivors in the sideboard, basically. These are the cards that I would Karn for very, very often. So these are the Explosives, Wurmcoil, Lattice, of course, in order to, to combo lock our opponent, Pithing Needle, and Tormoscript. these are the 5 cards that I find myself Karn wishing for the most. So those are the ones that survived. In order to make room for these 2 resting pieces, I had to cut Crucible of Worlds, which is a card that I wish I had a space for in my sideboard, but unfortunately I do not because I want to fit Rest in Peace. And the other card that I cut was an Obstinate Baloth. Instead of the Obstinate Baloth, you could also maybe play Grafdigger's Cage. In fact, you could do like 1 Rest in Peace, 1 Grafdigger's Cage if you wanted to. All right, Goldenbacks. Yeah, it's been a minute. Glad that you're here to hang out a little bit. So Grafdigger's Cage is also very much a consideration. So that's again another card that you want to have in your toolbox of possible cards, basically. The card I missed a lot when playing the card list is Purge. Yeah, Snuggle. So one of the good question, by the way. I guess it was not a question, it was more of a statement, but still. One of the reasons why Purge was one of the cards to go is that a good reason for Blood Moon was for running Purge was not only Liliana and Death Shadow, of course, but also Blood Moon. And Karn is a very good answer to Blood Moon, and it's also a very good answer to Liliana, because you can play Karn minus and go get Pithing Needle, which is actually a very common play pattern against the black-green Liliana decks. So that's why, playing Karn kind of made Celestial Purge go away. Against Phoenix, of course, you would always wish that you had access to Purge instead of Karn. But Karn is also win con that you can play through Blood Moon, so that's another one there. And if you see here, instead of Purge, we have Force of Vigor, which this is a card that has been quite impressive, actually. I have had this card do a ton of work for me, and if I had more room in the sideboard, I might try to add a second one. I think the first one is very good. I'm still not sure. I have not tested with 2, so I'm not sure I want 2, but I think I do want 1 though. And this was like the only real upgrade that we got from Modern Horizons, by the way. So yeah, so this is basically the Karn version that I would play if I were playing an event today. Now, because of the Hogak madness that happened, this is the final list that we have not talked about, and this one is a doozy. This one is a spicy one, okay? So, lots of things to talk about here. Basically, what we're doing is we are adding the Devoted Druid Vizier combo, okay? If you're not aware of how this combo works, basically, Devoted Druid is a 2-mana 0/2 that taps for a green mana, and you can put a -1/-1 counter on Devoted Druid in order to untap it. Vizier, says that if one or more -1/-1 counters will be put on a creature you control, that many counters -1 are put on it instead. What that means is that if you have both of these cards in play, and the Druid is not summoning sick, this is important, then you basically get access to infinite green mana. Now the ways to win once you have access to infinite green mana are Walking Ballista, or Duskwatch Recruiter, which can basically look at activate its ability, as many times as you need in order to find your Walking Ballista, or you can just activate this as many times as you need and just draw all your prime times, play all your prime times because you have infinite mana, do a bunch of silly things, and win that way. So those are the additions. And then we also have access to this card right here, Finale of Devastation. If we pay the green and X, we search our library and or graveyard for a creature card with converted mana cost X or less and put it into the battlefield. If you search your library this way, you shuffle it. If X is 10 or more, creatures you control get +X and gain haste until the end of turn. So there's a lot to digest here. First thing that I want to talk about is the reason why this works is because actually both combos, both parts of the deck, both aspects of the deck they work together very well. Okay, so if this weren't the case, I don't think that we would be able to fit both of these together. So what we have here is basically Devoted Druid taking the place of the 4 Sakura Tribe Scouts. But if you look at Devoted Druid is also ramping us, right? So even if we're not comboing off, you still have access to what is effectively a one-time Coalition Relic, right? Because you can use it one time to tap for 2 mana, and then after that, every single time they're gonna only tap for a single green. But still, it's basically like a ramp spell anyway, just by itself. So of course, this synergizes with the fact that we want to cast Primeval Tide, right? Then we have the card Finale of Devastation. This card, if we have access to 4 mana, is a ramp spell because of what I just explained. If we have access to Devoted Druid in play, this is actually a combo piece. It allows us to go get Vizier of Remedies or Dustwatch or whichever one we need. This one, in the late game, if we top deck it naturally, is going to get us a prime time. So it's actually a win condition too. And we are playing Walking Ballista anyway in our deck, right? So like this is just like a side effect, I guess. Of we were playing Walking Ballista anyway, so might as well add it to the combo. So that part is again very synergistic with both parts of the deck, because we can transmit for it and because we can combo off with it. And then of course making it to primetime mana is all we want to ever do, and this helps us get there. This and this also help us get there. So as you can see, the deck kind of works within itself, if that's a way to put it. So that's why I think this version of the deck is super interesting, and it has a lot of potential. I think the main reason why this even became a consideration, to be honest, is the fact that this part of the deck is very good against Hogak specifically. Devoted Druid is, first of all, a card they really struggle to interact with. Okay, it's a card they really struggle to interact with. The combo with Vizier is fast enough, since it is enabled on turn 3. You can play turn 2 Druid, turn 3 Vizier, and just combo off right then and there. So it's fast enough to keep up with the Hogak deck. Even if they have a good draw, they will. If you are on the, I guess if they are on the play and they have a good draw, they will kill you. But if you are on the play and they have a good draw, you still kill them before they kill you, which is very good. Of course, right? And yeah. So. One more thing that is great against Hogak is that Devoted Druid can kill itself at instant speed. This is not a minor thing, actually. Devoted Druid can kill itself at instant speed, so it can exile your opponent's bridges. This is actually very important in the matchup. So just by having a Devoted Druid in play, it doesn't matter whether it's someone is sick or not. Just having a Devoted Druid in play, it's threatening to interact with your opponent in that fashion. You can just exile your opponent's bridges in response to them sucking something, and they cannot kill you. Trex. This is actually super important, and I was going in my head through like the things that I want to talk about, and I remember that is actually very important. So those are the things that that basically put this version of the deck on the map. This is very much a metagame version of the deck. And I mean, as I guess most of them are. They are objectively good as well, but they are more of a meta call than anything else. Because one thing that you need to think about is that this version is significantly worse than your regular Karn or Hive Mind versions in the face of any kind of burn-centric deck. Because now your opponent's bolts actually stop your ramping, right? Before, I guess they can kill your scout, but that is not so brutal because it costs 1 mana. You're trading 1 mana for 1 mana, which is perfectly fine. But now your opponent is using bolts and they are trading with your mana creatures in a tempo positive way, which is actually kind of a huge deal in those matchups. If you draw your Amulet part of the deck, you're probably still fine. But this is something that, again, it's very, very new. I am still not sure this is an optimal list. I think that this is very much... I love this version. I would play 28th line instead of 1 of Scout. Yes, but no, and this goes with what I was about to say right now, Cubic. One thing that it's very important about this, and one thing that I have been experimented with, is positioning. Okay, what this deck has is a very interesting positioning in terms of how you position yourself in the matchup. For example, let's say that I'm playing against Hogak. When I sideboard with this version of the deck against Hogak, what I want to do is I want to bring in a bunch of interaction. Okay, I will go over why I'm running Rest in Peace and Tormod Crypt in a second, but I just want to go over this real quick. So against Hogak, I want these cards and maybe a couple of Path to Exiles. I can't remember the exact numbers that I go over with, but let's say that it's something like this. Now that is a lot of cards. What I have been doing is I have been sideboarding the Titan part of the deck. Okay? Now that opened up, like, that basically fit most of our... There you go. That's it. We're sideboarding against Hogak. You see what I'm saying? So we're... oh, actually I leave in a couple of prime times. Never mind. So I guess it's Scout and something like... I don't know. I mean, this is not the point. What I'm trying to say is, because the packs help you get Devoted Druid, and they are also your win con for Death's Watch. So you definitely want to keep your packs in. But yeah, we will go over. I mean, that is not important. I'm just trying to like accentuate the point. I don't remember what the exact numbers that I was using are, but still. So this deck can position itself in different ways against different matchups, which I think it's a very, very cool feature that it has. But it's... Will you be going a bit over sideboarding in this version versus other matchups? I don't think so, Richan, because I basically go over that on every single stream whenever I sideboard. So you can just like check out any of my previous streams that talk about Devoted Druid, and you can go over that. I'm just using this as an example. So whenever you're playing a matchup where your Devoted Druid part of the deck is the good one, you can side out part of your primetime of your primetime section of the deck, and you can do the opposite as well. Like for example, against Black-Green. Against Black-Green, you're never going to combo off. That just it's not gonna happen, right? So what do? You just side out a 2-1 for 1. This card is terrible. You just get it out of there. So you side out your Vizier. I guess against Black-Green, Death's Watch is good, but if you're playing against Burn, you're also never ever comboing off. So you can take out these two guys and you can bring in your sideboard cards. And against those matchups, you want to have access to your primetime version of the deck. To your primetime side of the deck, I mean. So it's very interesting, and it's very unpolished yet. And I want to stress this out. This is still a very new version of the deck. I don't have that much experience. Every single match that I've ever played with this version of the deck is on stream. So if you want to check those out, you can go to my YouTube channel. You can go in the archives and find them over there. But it's a very, very interesting version of the deck. That is for sure. And I think this might be the correct way to go against the current meta specifically. As soon as Hogak gets banned, I think that this is going to... I think that this version might become like not very good, honestly. So that is something to be aware. But again, it's cool to know that something like this could exist. So even if Hogak does get banned, and then you are, something grotesque gets printed again instead of Hogak, and then this is also a viable option that can be good in specific metagames. It tries too much for the Karn board. I've been playing on mono red Phoenix meta, and it's been good for me. Also helps the Hog matchup, and he said Phoenix. Dark Reaper, we did try Chalice. I was very unimpressed by it, because Chalice is actually a card that hits us very hard as well. And against those matchups that you're talking about, by the time that you can play a Karn minus it to go get the Chalice, and then play the Chalice, you're probably just dead. So yeah, I don't think that it's a good card in the Wishboard. But if it's been working for you, I mean, that's all it takes. So yeah. Any questions about all the stuff that we talked about so far? Please point them in chat. And that's been a lot of talking. So hopefully everybody is enjoying what we're doing here. This is more of how can I say, an informative stream than an educational one. Goldenback says, what do you think of running a split of 1 Tormods, 1 Surgical versus 2 Tormods? Just because you could target targets for Artilleria? Yes, first of all. Second of all, Surgical is just not a good card against the decks that we want it against. What cards would you bring in against Surgical? What cards would you bring in Surgical against, is what I mean. If you bring it against Hogak, cool. What are you Surgical in? Are you Surgical in Vengevines? Are you Surgical in... oh, we got a follow. Fanboys, thank you for the follow. Are you Surgical in Bridges? Are you Surgical in Bloodghasts? Are you Surgical in Gravecrawlers? Whichever one you Surgical, they will kill you with the other 3. It doesn't matter. It's not good. You got me a top 4 last weekend, but I can see your point, and I don't 2-3 on the play against it. Yeah, Dark Reaper. I mean, again, if it works for you, it works for you, right? So yeah. So I would rather have access to Tormod Script than I don't think Surgical is very good, honestly. But yeah. So what we can go over real quick is something that I saw people doing, and I saw I actually got a couple of questions about this. I talk about this on stream a fair amount because basically every stream somebody brings it up. But Leyline of the Void. The original list that Will... by the way, this is an idea by Will Pulliam. He was the one that suggested this to me, and then I simply tried it out on stream. But this is his brainchild. His original list is playing 4 Leyline of the Void, and I personally think this card is unplayable in Amulet. I think that... I will go over my reasoning right now. Basically, Leyline of the Void has... First of all, it has a massive cost. The cost of this card is huge. There are some decks that can mitigate that cost. We are not one of them. Who called the child William Poem? I don't know. Will's mom and dad probably. This is why the Hoag Day needs to sort of ban, yeah. That's a good point, Trex. The only way to beat it is either to raise it very difficult, to draw the very strategic graveyard, hate Leyline, rip. Yeah, so Leyline has a very massive cost. First of all, 4 slots in our sideboard, that's a huge cost. That is such a good cost. And you know what's even a bigger cost than 4 slots in our sideboard? 4 slots in our main deck. Now we're talking about a really high cost right there. Now, not only is 4 slots in our main deck a very, very high cost that I am personally already very hesitant to play, we're talking about a card that is literally a dead card. This is literally a dead card past turn 0. Like every time that you talk that this card is not turn 0, you just basically lost the game immediately. Now, this card is not particularly castable for us. Even if it were, if you cast it on turn 4, you're dead. Like, it's worthless. Because it doesn't even have a trigger like Rest in Peace. It exiles everything from that point on, which is irrelevant. Because you're probably just dead by that point. And Amulet is not a deck that can mulligan for a card like Leyline. If you're mulligan for a card like Leyline, it's just like, we already have a lot of stuff going on. We already need a lot of things to line up in the correct way. Granted, our deck is built to help those things line up. But if you are mulliganing for Leyline, that means that you are forced into mulligan otherwise keepable hands. Nestor Seltor, thank you very much for that Twitch Prime sub. Welcome to the Primetime Stronghold, and thank you for the support. So that means that you're mulliganing for a card that you know, it's very likely to make the rest of your hand terrible. Like let's say that you mulligan for Leyline, and then you mull to 6. Let's say that you mull to 6, and your hand is Leyline, Primetime, Steerings, Gross Chamber, Gross. Let's say that this is your 6-card hand. What do? Do you keep that? You're probably gonna lose. You're probably gonna lose. Because if you don't hit a land drop in your top 2 cards, you're dead. Because you drew 2 lands, yeah, but they're both spells lands. You literally cannot do anything. So you cannot afford to mulligan to Leyline, okay? You just cannot do it. Okay, so let's say that we have an opening 7, and it's a reasonable opening 7, right? So let's say that we have... Let's build a reasonable opening 7. Forest, Simic Growth Chamber, Steerings, Summoner's Pact. Okay, let's say that this is our 7. Okay? This is not an incredible hand, but it's a very, very keepable hand, right? We have a land drop, we have a ramp, we have Steerings as a way to find Amulet or I don't know, like an Azusa or some other way of ramping. We still have the way to do it, so yeah. So this is a very, very keepable hand, and it's actually a fairly good hand, right? Now, you have 4 Leylines in your deck, you go to your draw step, and you top deck Leyline. Game over. You just drew a blank piece of cardboard. Now, let's say that instead of Leyline, you're playing Rest in Peace. Or Tomor's Crypt. You just won the game. You just won the game right there. So, that is what I'm saying. This is not a deck that can mulligan to Leyline and be happy about it. This is not a deck that can keep cans because of Leyline and be happy about it. So, Leyline is, in my opinion, just unplayable. In the Amulet context, let me stress this. This is a great card. Great card if you're playing black-green. Great card if you're playing basically any Faithless Looting deck. Leylines are great in Faithless Looting deck because you can just grab redundant Leylines and discard them to looting. Get some like virtual card advantage, I guess. But yeah, Leyline is just not a playable card in the Amulet context. If you want to play it, do it. I think I am 100% sure that you are wrong if you're playing Leyline in your Amulet deck. And you can do whatever you want, but I think you're wrong. In Amulet of the Void is unplayable, the second best option is free. Yeah, exactly. So because the second best option is Rest in Peace, that is what we have here, you know. That is what I'm trying to do, and this is how I built my deck. Granted, Rest in Peace has other costs, and namely the biggest cost that we're playing to pay Rest in Peace is right here. I am playing Horizon Canopy instead of playing a 3rd basic forest. If I were not playing Rest in Peace, which I will not be as soon as Hoga gets banned, I will not be playing Rest in Peace anymore. But as long as I'm playing Rest in Peace, I want to play at least one untapped white source. It can be Horizon Canopy, it can be this card that I have so much trouble pronouncing, Wraithorverge Thicket. Wraithorverge Thicket. It can be this card, it can be whatever you want, but you want some, as long as it's not basic planes. It needs to tap for green as well. Our green mana requirements are very, very high. It's weird. I just have a lot of trouble pronouncing that card specifically. But yeah. So that is why I'm making the choice that I am, instead of, you know, playing Leyline like people are suggesting. And some people asked, one of the questions on Twitter was, because I asked people on Twitter and on the Discord and everything, what questions would they want to have answered, and somebody asked, is there a way to have a splash black version with 4 Leylines? And that is what I'm answering right now. There is a way to have a black splash. Definitely we can splash black. If you're splashing black, I don't think you want to be playing Leyline anyway. So that is to answer the questions. Sweet. Okay, very good. So that basically covers the different versions of the deck part of the stream. Now, real quick, I wanted to go over. I'm basically going to go over a very. I guess it's something that I did already in the initial video, which is go over a card for card, and consider the different options that we have available to us. Like for example, when do you want Hornet Queen? Well, you want Hornet Queen against decks that are going to go wide against you. Decks that have flying threats, for example, spirits. You want to have access to Hornet Queen against decks that will maybe surgical your Primeval Titans, which is a very real possibility in 2019 Modern. You always want access to Hornet Queen against mid-range decks that will struggle to deal with all the different hornets. For example, black green, any kind of Jund style deck. You want Hornet Queen against Affinity and Hardened Scales, decks that have evasive threats. There we go. Decks that have like flying threats that you can trade with by using Hornet Queen. What do I think about Negate versus Spell Pierce? Excellent question. And you can see that right now I have a split. Negate and Spell Pierce are two very similar cards that do two very different things. Number one, we have Spell Pierce. This card is excellent against decks that are trying to get under you. So the way I see it is Spell Pierce is for whenever we want to play a quick game. Whenever we're playing against decks like Dredge, for example. Against decks like... I wouldn't bring in Pierce against Hogak. I might bring in Pierce against Infect, for example. I think with my current configuration I wouldn't, but it's a possibility. Like I would not want to bring Negate against Infect, but I would strongly consider bringing in Pierce. Pierce is a card that helps us catch up, basically. It's not as good as at helping us force threats through, for example, because we will need access to 7 mana. And by the time we have 7 mana reliably, our opponent is also going to have a lot of mana in play, right? So Spell Pierce, like the difference between Spell Pierce and Negate, I think that if you want to force stuff through, Negate is going to be better. So for example, against blue-white, it's nice to have access to Negate. Not so nice. I guess there's some construction going on. Excuse me about that. I guess there's some construction going on next door. Negate is very, very good against like decks like blue-white control and where the game goes long. If you want your game to be done by turn 3 or 4, then Pierce becomes much more attractive. If you think that your game will go to turn 7+, then Negate becomes considerably more attractive. So that is basically the main difference that you want to make. Here we're splitting the difference with one Spell Pierce, one Negate. Depending on the metagame, I will go like back and forth. Whether I want Spell Pierces and whether I want Negate. A couple of things that I want to point out though is if you are trying to force through a 6 mana threat, then having access to Negate, I think it's better than Spell Pierce. However, if what we're trying to force through is Karn, which is a 4 mana threat, then I think that having access to 5 mana, it's going to be easier for us than from our opponent in most occasions. So I think that if you're trying to force Karn through, then maybe Spell Pierce has a stronger consideration. Another thing with Spell Pierce is that if you're playing Coalition Relic, then you can play the Relic and then be holding up Spell Pierce on turn 3, which is actually a very important thing to point out. So also be aware of that if you're thinking of playing Spell Pierce. It makes a lot of sense. I'm still in the Hive Mind list, and my meta is very blue-white heavy, so I'm probably going. Yeah, you definitely want to go for 2 Negates in your blue-white heavy meta. So yeah, those are the differences between Spell Pierce and Negate. Another thing to consider, another card to consider is Swan Song. Swan Song is another card to consider in this slot. Swan Song it's reasonable in the blue-white matchup, but not so much anymore, because Swan Song does not counter Planeswalkers. And I think that at this point in time, with how good Planeswalkers have become, I just don't think that we're going to see Swan Song be played very much any longer. Same thing with Flusterstorm. Flusterstorm is a very, very cool card, but the fact that it does not answer Planeswalkers, even if this is specifically better against the deck Storm, obviously, I just don't think that this is a playable sideboard card in Modern, unfortunately. Even though I think the card is very, very sweet, but yeah, I just don't think it's playable because it doesn't answer walkers, and it's getting increasingly important to be able to answer Planeswalkers in the current Modern metagame. Whether you bring 2 path versus 3, is it play draw dependent? Great question. The difference between a path depends on a couple of things. First of all, the list that I'm playing. Okay. Depends on mostly on the cards that I'm trying to take out, is what I'm saying. The list that I'm playing is very dependent, and also how relevant the card Path to Exile is at different points in the game. For example, if I'm playing against Burn, Path to Exile it's very, very important for me to have access to in the early games. But I only want to see exactly 1 copy of Path to Exile every game I play against Burn. I don't want to see the second one because my opponent is very likely to have only 1 creature that I really want to kill. More often than not, that's going to be Eidolon. So I only want to have access to 1 answer to 1 Eidolon because it's just not very likely that my opponent will draw 2 Eidolons or more. So I don't think I want all 3 path against Eidolon. Now, if I'm playing against Shadow, then I want to kill their Gourmet Anglers and I want to kill their Death Shadow, and they play counter magic counter magic and discard spells to get rid of my paths. So I want to draw as many paths as humanly possible against Death Shadow. So I want to bring in all 3, and if I have 4, I will bring all 4. Same thing against Phoenix. I want all the paths I can get my hands on. Same thing against another example, Eldrazi. Against Eldrazi decks, I want all the paths that I can get. Against humans, I want all the paths that I can get. Against black-green, it's very, very interesting because against black-green, I want access to like a lot of paths, but I also don't want access to that many paths. And the reason is because I want to kill that Confidant on sight. There's many situations where I want to kill Tarmogoyfs as well. But there's a lot of times where Path will be a dead draw because your opponent will be clocking you with a Liliana instead. So Path to Exile is a much more situational card against black-green than against something like I was saying, like against Death Shadow. So against black-green, it will 100% depend on what my list looks like. Depends on how many good cards I have against black-green that I'm interested in bringing in, and how many cards I want to take out. So in that case, it's actually very, very list dependent. Lately, I've been on blue-black Karn list and trying one Trinket Mage in the main board to hedge when I side in a crypt. Yeah, Snuggle, that's a very reasonable thing to be doing. So this is my latest Karn list. I assume that you are playing the one of Trinket Mage over Coalition Relic, maybe? Because I think you definitely want access to 2 copies of explosives. Is EE too slow against black-green to kill Bobs and Golf? No, explosives is insane, yeah. In fact, against explosives, you bring in... if you're not playing Karn, you bring in all 3 explosives against black-green. If you are playing Karn, of course, you want to, have access to the card in your sideboard, and Karn is great in the black-green matchup, so you definitely want to have access to to Karn. You don't want to side him out, so you will have your field explosives will be in the sideboard, so you can Karn for it. I have one EE and Ballista in the board. Well, if you have Ballista in the board, I mean, if you have Trinket Mage, then then it makes even more sense for you to play Trinket Mage in the main deck, right? But yeah. So, if there are no other questions, one thing that I wanted to go over is, as I was saying, like pointing out different cards and their value, and not only that, but I also want to point out my choices for the Wishboard, which is something that I think is very, very interesting, and I did quite a bit of exploration with. I definitely spent. I have definitely tried every single card that is reasonable and maybe a little bit unreasonable to play in your Karn Wishboard, and I can tell you what my experience has been. We talked about this. We talked about Chalice. We talked about Crucible. We talked about Ensnaring Bridge. We talked about Liquidmetal Coating. We also talked about Silent Arbiter, which is kind of like the alternate Ensnaring Bridge. What else did I test? I'm sure I test other stuff as well. Relic. I tested Relic of Progenitus. I tested this one is actually a very cool one that it worked reasonably well, to be fair, which is Chromatic Lantern. I actually tested this one in paper. Whoops. What else did I test? Nestor Seltor. Yes, you may. Of course, you may. There you go. It's the first link over there. Also citing out an amulet for the Wishboard. Yeah, no, that is definitely something that I do sometimes in some matchups. But some people were thinking about like playing the fourth amulet in the sideboard, like to begin the game with, which I think it's not good. I think you of course want all four amulets in the main deck. I thought it was an interesting thought experiment, but I think ultimately it's wrong, because you want to have you want to maximize the chances that you have amulets on turns 1, 2, and 3 at most. And if you are playing one amulet less, that means that it's less likely for you to actually if you're playing one less amulet, that means that it's less likely for you to draw it in the early turns, which is when you want it. And if you are like using Karn, you're very, very rarely minusing for an amulet. It's just very strange. Oh, Sorcerer's Spyglass, yeah. Yeah, you don't want to depend on Karn to get your amulet. That's too many hoops. Okay, so these are the tried cards. These are the survivors, and I will go over all of them real quick. First, let's look at the ones that made the cut. These are cards that I find myself wishing for very, very often. No, I don't think we have tried Ratchet Bomb, because I think that explosives is just strictly better for our purposes. So we definitely tried one explosive in the sideboard, which is great. And let's start there. Engineering Explosive is an insane card. We might actually be the best Engineered Explosives deck in the format. We play very little in the form of permanents that we dislike getting destroyed. Amulet is basically the only permanent that we don't want to get destroyed. that it's on 1. We rarely care about the scout getting dying, because by the time that we would destroy our own scout, it would have already done its job. And we don't care about Azusa because of the same reason. Kind of like the same thing with Coalition Relic. And also we're able to make it to 5 mana. Like it's very, very possible to Explosives on 5. So this card is excellent. I wish for this one very much immediately after I resolve Karn, and I wish for explosives against humans, against black-green. It's a very common play pattern. Against a bunch of combo decks, it's also very common to do that. Explosives is just a very, very good card to have access to in the sideboard. Boggles, Merfolk. There's a lot of very, very good, very, very good, a lot of matchups where this is very, very good. Is what I was trying to say. The second one I wanted to point out is the easy one, which is Mycosynth Lattice. This one is the basically the 1-2 punch combo. However, I think that Lattice is a very, very misunderstood card. I cannot tell you how many times I have won because my opponent played a Karn and then they immediately minused and get Lattice, and then they pass the turn. And I'm like, what are you doing? Why are you doing this? You just minused your Karn and you got literally 0 value out of him. And now I attack your Karn with like an Azusa with boosted by Slayer Stronghold, and now your Karn is dead and you have a 6 mana do nothing in your hand. Good job. This is a very, very misunderstood card. You should never minus for Mycosynth Lattice unless you plan to win the game. And what I mean is you plan to immediately win the game, meaning that you are immediately locking your opponent out. Or alternatively, if you have if they can answer your Karn, but you have like a second Karn in hand, so you don't care, so you still got them locked up. But this is not a card that you want to auto minus for. You want to, for your Karn to, first of all, if you think that it's not very likely to get answered, it's very common for you to play a Karn and just plus either on nothing or on an Amulet or Coalition Relic in order to protect him. That's actually something that happens often, and by doing so, you're also bringing Karn up to 6 loyalty, which is pretty sick. And unless your opponent has something like an Assassin's Trophy or something, they're not going to be able to answer your Karn very easily from 6 loyalty. Second, you can, if you're not sure that your Karn is going to survive, make sure you get some value out of him. This basically means get any of the other 4 cards. And the reason why these 4 cards survive, it's because it's very, very likely that one of these other 4 options is going to be better. Whichever deck you're playing against, doesn't really matter. One of these options is going to do something. Okay? Either you are instantly going to get Tormod's Crypt against a graveyard deck, and I will talk about this versus this in a second. Either you are immediately going to get Tormod's Crypt, or you can get some value by needling something of relevance from your opponent. I have even needled Altar of Dementia out of Hogak because I knew that they were going to answer my Karn, so I just preemptively answered an onboard Altar when my opponent didn't have much else going on. So it's important for you to correctly identify what it is that your opponent can do that can beat you. It's very important for that to be your thought process. You play your Karn, and the first thing you think is, okay, can I win here? Meaning, can I Lattice here? So if you slam the Karn and you have 6 mana left, and your opponent has nothing on board, it's okay, your Karn is probably going to survive, and you just get Lattice and you play it, win the game. Cool. But if your opponent has 1 or 2 attackers, don't get Lattice before you have already set up your defenses. Meaning some champ blockers, or Khalni Garden also does a lot of this, or your Prime Time or a Ballista to answer whatever your opponent can attack you with, that kind of stuff. So make sure that you have that part covered, because you want to make sure that you get value from your Karn. That is going to be extremely important. If you want to win games of Magic, that is the case. So we talked about this too. Next one. This is secretly, I think this is the single card that I Karn wish for the most. For a single mana, which by the way is not something uncommon to like play Karn on turn 3 with 5 mana, like with only access to 5 mana. Like for example, turn 1 Amulet, turn 2 like make a land drop, and turn 3 Azusa. That will make you, with a bounce land, that will give you access to 5 mana total, which is exactly what you need to Karn into Needle. Yeah, a lot of times you're gonna be able to, you're gonna make it to turn 5 and to turn 3 with 5 mana, and that is why this card is, I think it's significantly better than Spyglass. Yes, there's 1 mana that you can use. And for 1 extra mana, you know for sure what you need to name, but the extra mana is relevant way more often than the information. Because if you are smart and you think about this properly, you will know what your opponent's outs are. So if you know that your opponent is, I don't know, they are just like going off with the artifact combo. What's the Sword of the Meek? Yeah. So you can name Thopter Foundry. You can name Karn Liberated against Tron. This is a play that happens all the time. You just you play Karn on 4. Or on turn 3, and you immediately minus for Pithing Needle, and you name Karn Liberated, because your opponent's only way to beat you at that point is to slam a Karn immediately, and then minus on your Karn. So that is something that happens very often against Tron. Against blue-white is I think the only matchup where I could see Spyglass being better. But again, we're talking about turn 3 or turn 4. So if we're doing this on turn 3 or turn 4, you will know which Planeswalker your opponent can have that will get you, if that makes sense. So if depending on your opponent's mana situation, you can know whether you should name Jace or Teferi. Baby Teferi existing now makes this a little bit worse, because that is another Planeswalker that you probably want to needle, because it can be very annoying. But so the blue-white matchup is the only one where I could see maybe Spyglass being better. But even the other day against the mirror match, like we identified that my opponent's only out to win in the game was for them to play a primetime, haste it and kill my Karn immediately. So I just Karn and immediately minused for Pithing Needle, and I named Slayer Stronghold, because that's the only, even though it shut off my own, but that is the only way that my opponent can beat me at that point. So yeah. Trek. So I covered naming Altar against Hogak. One important thing to note is that if your opponent doesn't have a board state, then Karn himself actually answers the Altar, which his static ability. So that is also something to be aware of. But if you think that your Karn is in danger, or if your opponent is very likely to answer it, then preemptively getting the needle, and I explained like that I have actually done so. Preemptively doing it might be the correct play. Wurmcoil Engine. Okay, this one is an interesting one. Wurmcoil is one of my go-tos in matchups where I know that the Karn will be answered. So if I'm playing against any kind of like mid-range deck, black green rock, Death Shadow, any of those kinds of deck that really struggle to deal with a Wurmcoil and to beat a Wurmcoil Engine, that is it's just basically it's automatic. You just basically play your Karn and you minus to go get Wurmcoil Engine, and then very often Wurmcoil will just win the game on its own. In fact, the other day What happened is, again, we were playing the mirror. I think it was the same match, actually. And I played Karn, and I minus for Wurmcoil, and then I minused for Pithing Needle to name Sunhome. Which then means that my opponent, in order to trade with my Wurmcoil, they cannot attack through my Wurmcoil with a prime time. They need to like trade, which was actually kind of cool. It was the first time that I had done that, so that was pretty sweet. And again, it goes to show the flexibility of Karn and why this Karn adds so many layers of complexity, not only in deck building, but also very much on gameplay. I want to see them put Wurmcoil on the big screen with Magic the Gathering movie. That would be cool. This is a sweet one. Unfortunately, it's probably going to be like Planeswalker based. Planeswalkers suck. But yeah, anyway. So Wurmcoil can be very good even in situations where you wouldn't think it could be good. Sometimes Wurmcoil is just your out. The only situations where I don't really like Wurmcoil is against decks like Burn, which can very easily play around it. Not only thanks to Skullcrack, but they can like block the Worm and like bolt their own dudes, so they deny their life gain. So against those matchups, Wurmcoil is very rarely gonna be, particularly good, but it's been very, very good, and it has definitely earned a slot in my sideboard after testing with it a very, very good amount. I think this is very good to be in the sideboard. We talked about this one. We can take it out. We get to talk about our graveyard hate. I always choose Stormward Script, and the reason is it's very straightforward. Many times against graveyard decks, in fact, let's start by saying that graveyard decks have one thing in common: they're usually very fast. They're usually very quick. Stormward Script, it's a 0 way of exiling your opponent's entire graveyard. That is huge. That is just huge. You can play Karn and then immediately minus Karn for Tormod Script, and then play Tormod Script with 0 mana floating. This is very, very relevant against decks like Hogak, of course, Dredge, and even something like Storm. I cannot tell you how many times, and this is through multiple matches against Storm, how many times I have won against Storm because I have Tormod Script instead of Relic of Progenitors. And this includes both in main deck and in the sideboard. So I want to point that out. Like the difference between 0 mana that you need for this effect and actually 2 mana that you need for this effect is the difference between winning the game and losing the game. And I think that it's strictly correct to play Tormod Script, and you should not be playing Relic of Progenitors. And this is even as a sideboard option. If you want a sideboard option, just play Rest in Peace. Play a card that will like be KO against the graveyard decks. The only situations where Relic is actually good is against blue-white and black-green decks. Blue-white and black-green decks. So these are mid-range decks that get some value from their graveyard, but are not very graveyard-centric. So you get to mess with the graveyard, mess with the graveyard, mess with the graveyard, and then when you want the effect, you can just cash in the Relic for the full effect, exiling both graveyards, and actually you get a card for your trouble. So in those matchups where you're not very short on mana, and your graveyard is not winning the game for your opponent, but it's just like one tool, one value engine, then Relic is definitely better than Tormod Script. But I do think that you want your sideboard cards to be impactful against the decks where you are struggling with, namely Storm, KCI back when KCI was the deck. Those kind of decks that just like win and they will flat out kill you on the spot with their graveyard. That's the decks that you want this kind of card against. And against those decks, their Tormod Script is significantly better than Relic of Progenitors. So I think Relic could be maybe a main deck consideration in some metagames, just the same way that Tron plays Relic. But I don't think it's very good. I don't think it's particularly good. Even against Hogak, Hogak can very easily win through a Relic of Progenitors, whereas they can't really win through a Rest in Peace. Like, they need to answer it before they kill you. So if your idea is to buy time, Tormoscript does that much better than Relic of Progenitors. So I think this card is not very good. Amazing content. Oh, thank you, Jose. I really appreciate it. First saw all these slick artifacts and I was like, yo, sick deck text. Then I counted the cost. Oh yeah, yeah, Hofi. No, we're going over the cards that I have tested that I have not liked in the Karn sideboard. So okay, let's go through this row now. Silverskin Replica. This was a very cute idea. I don't know who suggested it. I can't remember. But the idea is very cool, right? You basically have Karn be able to fetch for an artifact that can answer a Blood Moon. That was the main idea behind Silverskin Replica. In practice, this didn't really work out that well. And in two different ways. First of all, against decks that were playing Blood Moon, Karn was already doing a lot of the job at winning the game. And second of all, Silverskin Replica is just a really bad card. This is really bad, and it actually requires you to already have a basic forest in play in order to activate its ability, which it's kind of like asking. It was just asking for a lot. And again, the cost is very high, which is a slot in the sideboard. The only thing that I considered was running it over the Reclamation Sage, but Reclamation Sage is so much better than this that it got quickly discarded after not really doing anything and not really answering anything. So yeah, not a very good card. I think it would be a much stronger consideration if it didn't cost a green mana in order to activate this ability. If it were just like a 3 mana 1/3 and you just sack it to destroy an artifact enchantment, that would basically maybe be worth a slot. In fact, it would probably even be worth a main deck slot, even maybe. But I would consider it for sure. But that would not make sense in terms of the color pie. Silverskin Replica discarded. Yeah, it would basically make it a little bit too good. So next in line, Trinisphere. This card was actually very interesting, and I have won a couple of games where I Karned for a Trinisphere. Granted, this was not really against while I was playing Amulet. This is while I was playing the black-green Karn deck that I was brewing with. So having access to Trinisphere in the sideboard is super interesting, but it didn't play out. You know, it's just one of those things that really made sense in terms of and I guess we can pair this Trinisphere and Chalice together. They really make sense from a theoretical standpoint. You know, you're just like, yeah, I just play my Karn and I get an answer to either the Phoenix decks or Storm decks or stuff like that. And it kind of makes sense to an extent. In practice, what ends up happening is you play your Karn, you would minus for Trinisphere or Chalice, and then your opponent would untap and you would lose. So it ended up kind of not working out particularly well. Also, Trinisphere made like tempo-wise, like now we need 3 to transmute for Summoner's Pact, then 3 to cast the Pact, and then 6 to play the Titan. It makes things super awkward in terms of like continuing to develop our game plan after the Trinisphere has been resolved. And even sometimes you just like want to play Amulet and like make a bunch of mana, and now Amulet costs 3, so now you're making like 2 less mana than you were doing before with your Amulet. It was weird, you know. it just didn't end up working out, and it just was like a little bit too many feel bads, honestly. So the card was like on the edge of playability, and it just didn't quite get there in practice, which was kind of sad because I really love this card. I think this card is super sweet. Much better in Legacy than it is in Modern, though. Legacy and Vintage, I guess. So Trinisphere did not quite work out. Chalice is similar in the way that it plays out, in terms of that when you want to like wish for it, you want to make sure that you play it immediately, and at that point that costs you 6 mana, and it's just like at that point, prime time is more often than not gonna be a better line for you to go for. Or basically against the decks where you would want Chalice, if all you wanted was to buy time, it would be better for you to like Karn minus for Tormal Script, like against both Storm and like Phoenix decks. Those kind of spells decks, all of them use their graveyard a fair amount. So, and minusing for Tormal Script ended up being the play more often than not. However, this is definitely on the maybe pile, and I could definitely see some situations where this card is actually worth a slot, especially after Hoga gets banned and I can take these resting pieces out of my sideboard. So Chalice is definitely a consideration. And speaking of considerations, we get to Crucible of Worlds. This card is sweet. Having access to Crucible in your main deck without needing to play the card has been very, very good. Against decks that want to go after your lands, you don't care about that anymore. Against decks where you can go after the lands, now you can do that with Ghost Quarter. You can get access to multiple Tularia Wests. You can get access to, like, you can just go squatter your own Bojuki Bog and then like replay it. It opens a lot of lines. Crucible opens a lot of lines, and Crucible was actually in my sideboard, and I was basically forced to cut the Crucible because I needed to make room for Rest in Peace. So as soon as Hoga gets banned, the resting pieces are going to disappear from my sideboard, and Crucible will come back in. So Crucible is definitely a consideration, and so much a consideration that if I could, I would actually play, and I would be very excited to have access to this in my sideboard again. So that brings us to Ensnaring Bridge. Ensnaring Bridge is yet another card that makes a lot of sense in Wishboards with Karn, and you see a lot of decks that play Karn having access to Ensnaring Bridge in the sideboard. That is a Dracitron, Actual Tron, the mono red Prison deck. All of these decks that are playing Karn, and all of them have access to Ensnaring Bridge. Yeah, also good for resetting Gentleman. That is Crucible, of course. All of those decks play Ensnaring Bridge in the sideboard, and the reason for that is because of aggro decks, right? Like Dredge, Humans, all of those decks, they attack you and they go wide, and Ensnaring Bridge blanks them. However, there's a very real, if you read out the text of Ensnaring Bridge, it's not that clear cut. Creatures with power greater than the number of cards in your hand can't attack. Well, we're playing a deck that plays 9 bounce lands. We are not particularly good at getting cards out of our hand. Hold fee, it will be $12. Any donation of $12 or more, I will play whichever list you want. And you can use that link if you want to make a donation for sure. So Ensnaring Bridge, yet you were blackmailing people. I'm not blackmailing. I'm not forcing anybody to do anything. If you want to see me play a deck that I consider is bad, I mean, you can do it. But I'm not going to willingly play a deck I don't like. Or a version of the deck I like that I don't like. Let's put it that way. So we are not very good at emptying out our hands. So Ensnaring Bridge just did not end up working out. And like against stuff like Humans, we would like minus for Ensnaring Bridge, and then they would still be attacking us with 2/2s and 3/3s because we had bounce lands and stuff in hand that we could not empty quickly enough. So it didn't work out, which led us to the next experiment, which was Silent Arbiter. No more than one creature can attack each combat, no more than one creature can block each combat. So that was an interesting idea, and it definitely played out way better than Ensnaring Bridge. However, in practice, we were facing against the same issue. The same issue that I don't know if you remember at the beginning of the stream, I was talking about how I originally wanted Rest in Peace and Stony Silence for the KCI matchup, but then they didn't end up working out because my opponents were they were already bringing in For Nature's Claim by default, basically. So the issue with Silent Arbiter was that my opponents, my humans opponents, were bringing in the Detention Sphere guy, Deputy of Detention, and they were also bringing in Night of Autumn, and they already were playing the Reflector Mage. So now my opponent, I'm wishing for this, I'm spending 4 mana to play it, and then my opponent has like 10 different cards that they can draw that immediately answer this. So in practice, it just didn't really work out as we wanted it. So it ended up getting cut, which is unfortunate because this is a very interesting card and a very sweet card. That again, it kind of should work in theory, but in practice it just didn't. Speaking of cards that should work in theory that in practice didn't, Liquidmetal Coating. Another card that you see all of those decks playing. Eldrazi Tron, Actual Tron, Mono Red Prison, all of those decks, they actually they are playing a one of Liquidmetal Coating. And I tried it and it never did anything. One thing that people forget very often is the fact that just like Lattice, this card is literally a 2 mana do nothing unless your Karn survives. And that is something that people forget very often. Like on stream all the time, I see people like slamming a Karn and then they immediately minus for Liquidmetal Coating and then I attack the Karn. And yeah, now they have a 2 mana do nothing and they got no value from their Karn. This card only works in very specific scenarios, and again, we are not so concerned about destroying our opponent's lands as we are concerned about our opponent not destroying our lands, which is what Crucible is for. It's very rare for us to want to go for something like this. It's different it's different for those other decks which are interested in like messing with their opponent's mana. Or it's important to know that this can stop Planeswalker activations as well, as long as Karn is alive. But it just didn't work out in practice. It just didn't do anything, basically. It was just like a slot in our sideboard that we never wished for because it was never good. Unless we were already winning. So it never helped us catch back from behind. This makes a way more sense if you are playing something like Ensnaring Bridge, because you can like protect your Karn that way, and then this card of course gets considerably better if your Karn is alive, and by that I mean it does something at all. So that is the reason why, since we're not playing that card, actually leveraging Liquidmetal Coating was not an easy thing to do, nor something we were interested in doing. So Liquidmetal Coating did not make the cut either. We get onto Chromatic Lantern. This is a very interesting one, actually. It's basically a way that we can Karn minus for what is effectively an answer to Blood Moon. Because this turns into all of our lands being mana producers of any color. So this one was sweet. It's also a way of Karning into ramp, which can also be relevant. This makes sense, and it's not as terrible. Like this was better than the Silvok guy. I remember what the name of it, the Silvok Replica. I was thinking Silvok Outcast, different card. This ended up playing better than the Silvok Replica, but it was still not good enough, because in the situations where we actually do have a shot at winning, Karn was the one enabling that for us anyway. Like if your opponent slumps a Blood Moon and they have nothing else, you just play a Karn and you just win anyway with your colorless threat. And yeah, it just didn't really make sense, really. But it's not a bad card. It wasn't actually bad like this one. This one was actually bad. This one wasn't actually bad. It simply felt unnecessary. And again, the slots in your sideboard are super tight. And again, I already want to make room for this Crucible, and I think that this Chalice would probably be you know, earlier in line to be added than the Chromatic Lantern, and I still don't. It's still not there. So yeah, so those are all the cards that we covered, all the cards that I tested in the slot, in the Cyber Wish slots, and these are the ones that made the survival. So of course, if more reasonable artifacts get tested, I will for sure give them a shot and see, you know, whether they are worth it or not, because the whole Wish sideboard aspect of this deck is where a lot of its strength lies, right? The fact that Karn is such a powerful tool and a really powerful engine. So that's a very real, that's a very cool aspect of the deck. But it's yeah, but those were the cards that I tried, and these are the ones that worked, and those are the ones I didn't. Any questions? Last 3 cards main deck are 2E and a Ballista. Yeah, yeah, as you can see here. Sorry, I totally. Why do you feel it's bad? Do you value Death Watch and EE and a forest that can't become bad, or do you value too much regular cyber cards? Oh, you're talking about the Karn devoted Druid list so bad. I think that it's doing too many things, and it's not doing any of those things well enough. That is the reason. Like each card that you're taking out from one of your other plans, it's making your newer plans worse. And as I explained, the idea for this list is that it works with itself. Like both of these plans work fairly well with one another. The Karn plan has nothing to do with either of these cards. In order to fit the Karn plan, you're making both of these plans better, both of these plans worse. So I just don't see any point in going the Karn route. Like there's no reason for it. I just think it's just making your deck worse just because you can. And it's just trying to prove a point that needs no proof making, because it doesn't make sense. I don't really understand the reasoning. If you could give me like fair reasons why you would want to do that, I would listen, but I doubt that you're going to be able to convince me. But yeah. So that was 2 hours and 11 minutes of me. It's crazy. I can talk about this deck for literally hours. I have done this twice already. This is hilarious. How do you feel about the blue-red Arcline matchup versus the voted title list? Do you think the card list is better against that? Yes, by a very good margin. Now, bolts answering your mana creatures is not where you want to be. Like, even against the... If you look at my sideboard guide, I side out scouts against Phoenix because they are terrible. And your opponent getting value by stopping your ramp without giving you any Artemis Pisagal, thank you for the follow. Without you getting any value from your ramp is how you lose that matchup. It's a lot of tempo, and it's even worse here because you are actually spending 2 mana on your ramp creature, and they spend only a single mana bolt in it. So it's even worse. We can really side out the Druids against them, right? Because we're just really slow. Yeah, but like we are not bringing in enough good cards in the match. I mean, I guess you can side out the Druids, but you also don't want the Finales. Like this card is only good in the deck because it's a 4 mana ramp. And if you're siding out the Druids, then now the Finales become also bad, and then the Ballista was already bad. So now you have you literally have 11 cards that are terrible in your deck, and there's no 11 cards that are good in your sideboard. So that is the issue, you know. UV Dentist, thank you for the follow. I've tested it, so I'm merely talking about it. Haha, the threat density and the versatility against both decks that are interactive seem decent in a Hoag blue-white meta. Well, you don't care about threat density. Like, we just have so much threat density already. Like, why do you want more threat density? That's what I'm saying. It tries to fix an issue that is not an issue. Like, even with this version of the deck, it's already like, we have 4, 7, 11, 14, 15 threats. That's way more. That's more threats than Jund plays. You know, so it's just like, what problem are you trying to fix? You're not trying to fix any issues. More angle of attack than finding some way to kill opponent. Yeah, but what? I don't know. Again, it just feels like we have two very different angles of attack already. I don't understand why you would want to add a third one. And again, by adding that third one, it's the issue that you're making your other two angles of attack significantly worse by adding a third angle of attack that it's I don't think good enough. So I missed most of the versions that I think is the best right now. Well, I basically went over the fact that there is no better version. Like, there's no objectively better version. There's just like different versions, and I guess this is a nice way to wrap it up. Nice, good question, Mod Gallius. Is Amulet Black Splash is good in a fair meta? I've come close but never played it personally. Siding with the deck did feel weird because everything. Yeah, exactly, Hope. That's the issue. So, in order to wrap things up a little bit. Before I was playing Through the Breach and yeah, exactly. So let's go over the different versions and the pros and cons of each version. So this will be kind of like a way to sum everything up, and I guess it's a nice way to close out the whole monologue. I guess. Number one, we have let's go from now backwards. We have version number one, Devoted Druid. Amulet Primetime list. So this list it's good in terms of it adds a different angle of attack, okay, which gets interacted in a different way than the regular Primetime angle of attack. It's particularly much better against the deck Hogak Bridgebind, sorry. Against the Hogak Bridgebind deck, this is by far the best version of Amulet. Like, by far. By a long amount. Because the Devoted Druid angle of attack is just so good against them. And because the card Devoted Druid itself, it's a form of interaction again in the form of exiling their bridges at instant speed. So definitely the Devoted Druid angle of attack is very good against Hogak specifically. So this is because Hogak is such a big part of the metagame right now. This is the list. If I had to play an event now, I would play a list like this list or something very similar to this. Oh, nice, Wolfie, yeah. So this is the list that I would play right now. The trade-off is you're making your blue-white matchup significantly worse. Again, because I'm playing Rest in Peace in the sideboard, so I am playing the Canopy. So this means that I'm running one less basic forest than I would like to have access to. The Devoted Druid angle of attack is very easy for your blue-white opponent to interact with, and it's just making your prime times a little bit worse. And also Tribe Scout is the best card in the blue-white matchup, so it's very tough to be cutting on those. Like, we would extra scouts if we could, you know, and we're playing only a single one. So that's why this version of the deck is much worse against blue-white specifically. It's a little bit worse against black-green as well, and so it's better against the fast combo decks. But by using this, you're making your Titan angle of attack slightly worse. That is just a fact. Right, so against the decks where the Titan angle of attack is the good one, then your matchup is going to be a little bit worse. So that is the pros and cons of this list, and this is probably again the list that I would play today if I had to. Modern is in a very aggressive state currently, and this is probably the best way to go. Pretonian LXXII 32, I assume. Thank you for that tier 1 subscription. Welcome to the Primetime Stronghold. I really appreciate the support. Share some hype. Question: starting with a bounce in play and 2 amulets, with a bounce and a titan in hand, what's the best thing you can do? Kill your opponent. that is what you do. You play the bounce land, you get 4 mana from that bounce land. I'm assuming that these are green producing bounce lands, because you have 2 of them and there's only one bounce land that doesn't produce green. So yeah, so you can kill your opponent from there. Alright, do you to every deck that's been donated for? I do. Hopefully, yeah, I do. Love the deep dive into the deck. Yeah, thank you, Praetorian. I don't know if you checked out the first part, I guess, of this thing. No, Shadow, you would 20 them. You get exactly lethal for 20. I recently bought all the cards to play this deck 3 ways. Sweet, awesome. Yeah, it's as I'm explaining right now. Each version of the deck has their pros and cons. Yeah, the other day I actually bought the playset of Finale so I can play this in paper if I want to. That's the only thing that I was missing. So I should be all set for this version too. Okay, so we talked about this version of the deck. Let's talk about Karn. Karn is very, very good against all the mid-range decks. What I like about Karn is that it gives you a lot of angle, a completely different angle of attack, which is nice to have access to, and it does so in a nice, clean way. The only thing that it requires from you, which is a big cost, I will grant that, is the fact that it forces you to have access to dedicate your sideboard slots to help facilitate Karn. What I mean is, if I were playing Hive Mind, for example, I would not be playing Wurmcoil, I would not be playing Lattice, and I guess these 2 maybe I would play. So not so much about these 2, but I would not be playing these 2 cards, for example, right? And because I'm playing Karn, I am, kind of forced into playing these cards in my sideboard. These sideboard slots are kind of like taxed because of Karn. However, the Karn angle of attack, it's very good against a lot of decks, particularly all that is mid-range, all that is controlled, and even some combo decks, oddly enough, because the static ability is excellent against Ad Nauseam. It's excellent against any kind of like Thopter Sword random weird deck. It's awesome against Hardened Scales / Affinity. It's very, very good there. So Karn is just randomly a good card in some like in a diversity of matchups. So it's kind of nice to have access to that for sure. However, we're missing out in decks where the Hive Mind kill is just the nuts. That would be blue-white. Like Hive Mind is insanely good against blue-white. Hive Mind is insanely good against Tron as well, but Karn is also insanely good against Tron, so you don't really miss out on anything right there. Hive Mind is also very good against Scapeshift, where Karn is not that good. I guess Hive Mind is not that insane against Scapeshift. It's just okay against Scapeshift. Yeah, okay, so never mind. And Karn is not particularly incredible in that matchup either. But the big cost of Karn then is the sideboard slots. So if you want to tackle a very specific metagame where Karn is not specifically good against, then you probably want to play the Hive Mind version because it allows for so much more flexibility in terms of your sideboard slots, right? Karn just taxes this a little bit too much. So that is the pros and cons of Karn. Then let's talk about Hive Mind. So this is the Hive Mind list right here. The Hive Mind list is... Let's start by saying that it is very powerful indeed. I like the fact that because we're not playing Karn, we have access to the Coalition relics, which are I just love this card. I think this card is very, very good in Amulet. We get clean access to the second explosives. We get access to the ballista. So in terms of like the actual list, we have space for the full basic forest. In terms of the actual list, it's just cleaner. And it has access to more sideboard cards. You can see that we can play cards like Celestial Purge. We can play cards like Tolsimir, right? Mr. Red, thank you for the follow. We can play these cards, Tireless Tracker, Chameleon Colossus. We can play this card only because we are not playing Karn. Like if we're playing Karn, these are the cards that need to go. These are the cuts in the Karn version. So by playing a Hive Mind version, we have a sideboard that it's way more flexible and that we can basically gear to target specific decks that we want to target. So that is definitely a very strong consideration right there. And Richan, with that second month in a row subscription, welcome back. Thank you for sharing that Twitch Prime value here. What are your thoughts on Ethersworn Canonist in the Karn board? Ooh, that is a good one that I forgot. Actually, there's two that I forgot to name in the Karn board. Cards that I tested. Number one was I have not tested Canonist, to be fair. Canonist is not a great combo with Summoner's Pact though. So let's start by saying that this is in the Karn list. So let's start by saying that Canonist is not a great combo in the Karn in the cyber because of pacts. But it's the same issue that, you know, there's like a 2 mana consideration, but that it's kind of a big deal. And the issue with Canonist is that it's incredibly narrow. Like we would want Canonist against Storm and probably Phoenix. And Phoenix can answer the Canonist with a single bolt. It doesn't even need to be an Abrade. They can just bolt it and they just move on with their turn. And it's just a little bit too narrow. I personally have not tested it, but I don't think I would want to test it because it's just a little bit too narrow and it just doesn't do enough in matchups where you don't really want to, you know, be doing that, if that makes sense. And the other card that I did try is Cataclysmic Gearhulk. Cataclysm. This guy. This card was pretty bad. I did not like this card at all, basically. And the reason is, first of all, because your opponent choosing what they sack is a massive deal. Second of all, we do play like artifacts, other artifacts besides the Gearhulk itself that we would want to keep. So the 4/5 body is not particularly relevant because we would always rather play a prime time. And a 4/5 body is not really that good in Modern anyway. And also it's because, yes, we get to wish for it game 1. But that means like this would be good against humans, for example. And against humans, you can just wish for explosives. You can wish for Wurmcoil. You can wish for Lattice. Like you have other things that you can wish for already. And this requires you to have access to 9 mana against humans. That is a lot of mana. So it's not very good. Another thing is that in the matchups where you would want this, you also do not want Karn. So like against humans, you would literally just side out the Karn. At that point, why are you playing Cataclysmic Gearhulk, which is just significantly worse than the card I talked about earlier, which is Tragic Arrogance? Here, we get to choose what they keep, so we can leave them with a Noble Hierarch instead of them keeping like a 5/5 Mantis Rider or something, you know? So it's a very big deal there. So Gearhulk just didn't do what I wanted it to do. Yes, but against the Prison deck, I think that Karn is just good enough. Because the second that you are able to like get Karn, you can you lock down the Welding Jars, which is like the biggest deal in the matchup, and then you just like explosives their stuff, or you like Rex Sage their stuff, or you just lock them out with Mycosynth Lattice and they can't do anything about it. And they slowly are going to start to draw cards that they cannot cast, and then you just attack them with a Titan when the Ensnaring Bridge doesn't do anything anymore. So I don't think it's very good. I just don't think it's worth the slot. Again, each card in the sideboard it takes up a slot, and the slots are very, very precious, particularly in Karn lists. Did I talk about the Friends Grid? No, I did not, because I don't think it's very good. Like, I don't think that you want to be playing that game against Control. It's just like, I guess it's -2 Karn for like something that taxes them. It just doesn't do enough in enough matchups. Like our blue-white matchup with this list is already very, very good. So I don't think that we need extra help in those matchups. I'd rather have help in matchups that are actually troublesome. So yeah, that's why I don't really, I just don't see the idea. In a meta filled with elves, this card is fire. Again, in a meta filled with elves, I will play Tragic Arrogance before Cataclysmic Guildhog. Speaking of Summoner's Flag, does Ceramic Skull have a spot in as the 5th? No, I don't think so, Golden Banks. And the reason is because the white mana is kind of tough. And again, it's at that point, that's your 12th Titan. It's just like, why do you want that many? It comes to a point where just your Titans have diminishing returns. If you wanted to play a 12th copy of Titan, I would play the 4th Tolaria West, because that also is a land. So you can play the 4th Tolaria West to get your pack, to get your Titan. So I think that is going to be like a better card than the other Lamb Skull. Did you talk about the French? Yes, the Patrick Frog. What am I? Yeah. Guildhog won me in the match. Yeah, you're just talking about like one-time situations. Dark Reaper. It's just it's not a useful way to think about these things, because you can also Karn for explosives, right? It's just like you have like things that you can do against those matchups already. Seems overkill, and again, a spot in the sideboard, it just costs too much. I've been thinking about the black Guildhog since it's life gain on the turn you play it. Yeah, but double black is a very big cost. I mean, same thing with double white, right? That is actually something that is, it's relevant. Every time I do is 50 card core Titan plus 10 random cards. How many variations have you tried by this point? I tried a lot, Chameleon. I've tried a lot. I've tried many variations, and that's basically what I wanted to do on today's stream. Is I wanted to go over all the different variations. All right, so we talked about Karn, we talked about Druid, we talked about Hive Mind. Again, the pros of Hive Mind were the fact that we get like a much more flexible sideboard, and we have access to a very hard to interact Wurmcoil that is very good in some matchups, not so good in other matchups, but that's fine. Again, this is all like a trade-off, right? This is all a trade-off that you should be balancing. Let's talk about Bloom. Bloom is amazing if your name is Nicholas Bruno. And then I'm just messing. This card is something that a lot of people had found a lot of success with. Mostly Nicolas Bruno, who has been playing this version of the deck for years. And one thing to note about the card Lotus Bloom and about relying on the card Lotus Bloom is two things. Number one, Karn, very good against Lotus Bloom. Very good against Lotus Bloom. Number two, especially when you have basically no other ways of clocking the card, right? You can only pact it. That's your out. So Karn, very good against Lotus Bloom. Also, Baby Teferi. Baby Teferi. It's also a big deal. Basically, if you have a Lotus Bloom suspended and your opponent has a Baby Teferi in play, you cannot cast your Lotus Bloom. Womp womp. You die. So that is the thing. That is the issue with Lotus Bloom. Besides that, the pros of Lotus Bloom are added consistency. You can one thing that is actually very true is that this list mulligans way better than the scout list. Like you can have a mulligan to 4 that is like, Amulet, land, Lotus Bloom, bounce land, and that is actually a very, very good hand. Like all you need is a Titan, and you have a turn for Titan with Amulet. So that part of the deck is actually kind of awesome. Like the fact that you gain so much flexibility from Lotus Bloom. You lose out, like you're actually much weaker against artifact destruction. Like if people actually start playing the Collector Oof guy, then this version of the deck is going to be quite rough. Like you cannot play that card in the sideboard. That's actually one card that got printed that I didn't talk about. Collector Oof. That card is in the Hive Mind sideboard. If we go back to a heavy artifact metagame with like Hardened Scales and Affinity and those decks being good, Collector Oof might just become a staple of the deck. And unlike Melira, which somebody posted in chat, sorry, I forgot to answer the question about Melira. What I don't like about Melira, which is Melira, however you say this, is this is like your hate card against Infect. And the issue that I have with Melira is that your opponent can still very much kill you with regular damage. And the issue is that it can only reliably show up by turn 4, because if you pact for her, you still need to be able to pay for your pact on your upkeep. So it's not really like a 2-mana answer to Infect. It's more like a 3/4-mana answer to Infect. Or should I say, it's not a turn 2 answer to Infect, it's a turn 3/4 answer to Infect. And by that point, it's just too slow. It's just too slow. So I don't think that it's worth a slot. Also, it's like ridiculously narrow. This is like the narrowest card that we've talked about so far today. So yeah, I don't like this card very much. But again, Collector, oof. For those unaware, this was a printing from Modern Horizons, and it's basically a 2-mana 2/2 Stony Silence. So this card is going to be very, very good against the decks that I just talked about, Hardened Scales, that kind of stuff. One thing that also those decks don't necessarily kill you on turn 3 that often, so it's more reliable that you'll be able to pact for it and get away with it, to say it somehow. Melira is also a Pithing Needle for Devoted Druid. Yeah, but again, same thing. It's a Pithing Needle that shows... No, actually, it's not. Its creatures you control can't have -1/-1 counters put on them. So yeah, it doesn't work. If you're new decks become... Alright, so yeah, so Collector Roof is if that card becomes popular, then Lotus Bloom is of course significantly worse. Yeah. So that is what this deck is. This deck plays more as a combo deck. This version of the deck is way more combo centric than the Scout list. Like this deck cannot play a mid-range game plan. Like you just don't have enough cards to play the mid-range game plan. You're not playing the Ballista in the main deck. You cannot chip in damage with Scouts and stuff. So yeah, this deck just plays out much more different than the other versions that we have talked about so far. Druid is good. Yeah, we talked about the Druid version already, Shadows. And this takes us to... I guess that we can talk about the Black Splash for a little bit. Again, this is a thing that made sense back when KCI was the top dog, and it was mostly for these Cranial Extraction effects. Assassin's Trophy, though, it's a very good card. We can have access to it's good to know that this is a possibility. It destroys Blood Moon. It's quite good against Black Green X. It destroys anything from Liliana to Bob to Tarmogoyf. It doesn't matter. It just kills it dead. So Trophy, it's a very good card. I'm not saying it is not. However, it's just a matter of, would you rather have the flexibility and the 2-mana versus 1-mana, which is a big deal. I just want to point that out. Would you rather have access to this, which is a possibility, or would you rather have access to white for Path to Exile, Rest in Peace, and stuff like that? And this is what you gotta wait in. Of course, if you're playing Tolsimir, then of course the white splash becomes even more enticing, because you can basically play this guy for free. How many Amulet decks are on the left there? A lot. It's a lot of Amulets. So that's the thing with Tolsimir. That's the thing with the white and the black splash. But they are basically the same, It's just like in terms of the what they allow for. So yeah, that is what you want to think about in terms of like the mana base and stuff. They are both very, very similar, and you can like make versions for both that accommodate whichever card you want to choose. What I don't think I would like to do in the future is doing this, like splashing Ruric Thar and the Assassin's Trophy. That's just a little bit too much. That is Edgar being a greed monster. Okay, final list. Through the breach. This list is faster. This list is faster, but it Amulet is like the Amulet list, like the very first Amulet list that I did. So this is like an old school version of Amulet. So the bridge list, again, this list is outdated, and you could update it and everything, of course. But the thing with the bridge list is that you are gaining on speed, but you're losing on consistency, because now you have 4 cards in your deck that do nothing without the other part, right? Without the other half of the combo. So that is your trade-off. Of course, against matchups like black-green and stuff like that, you just side out your breaches, so you make your deck a little bit more consistent. But that means that in game 1, you might be playing against black-green, and then you just randomly draw a Worldspine Worm, and you're gonna be very, very sad. But that is the price that you're paying. That is the price that you're paying. Again, everything has a trade-off. Kurtur1, thank you for the follow. So also you get to play Wood for Primus in this list. I love this card. I have kind of like a unreasonable love for this card. So any chance that I get to play Woodful, I'm excited. But I don't like this version that much, honestly. However, this version is better against faster decks, of course, because again you're faster, so you have the chances of a faster kill. And you also become better against counterspells decks, because you get to play a little bit more at instant speed, which is not a minor thing. But one thing that is actually a real cost that I didn't mention earlier is this card. I think you kind of need to play this card in this version of the deck, because it enables a kill with just a single Amulet with Through the Reach. But this card is so bad. This card is so bad. It's basically the worst land that I've ever seen played on any Amulet lists. And I've seen bad lands played on Amulet lists, but this one is particularly awful. It basically just does nothing. And it's an ETB tapped colorless source in most situations. It's so terrible, but you kind of have to play it. So that is also like another important part. And it's funny because I streamed with this list like once or twice, and I drew this way more than I'm comfortable with. Do you think you'd stream a black version with Karn? I don't see the point. Like, I wouldn't in the current meta. I think it would be bad in the current meta. I don't see why you would want to do it. I think it could happen. I think you could definitely make it happen for sure. In fact, I think Grilled Cheese, which is actually the owner of the Amulet Discord, I think he's been experimenting with that. I don't remember exactly, so maybe he wasn't playing Karn in his blacklist, but he was for sure, like, he's been playing black in Amulet for a while. I just don't think it's better than the White Splash, personally, and that's just my personal take. I don't know if Reach is reliable compared to Finale. It kills so fast too. Yeah. So it's just different. Like, I don't think I would play Finale in a Karn list though, for example. Like, if I were not playing Karns, I might consider like testing like a 1 or 2 of Finale, but I wouldn't play more than that, because that's just like an 8 mana Titan, right? It's not very good. It's not very good. Again, actually a big part of what makes Finale a good card in the Druid version, and I said this a couple of times already, is the fact that it's a 4 mana ramp spell. Finale has like the mode of being a 4 mana ramp you for 2, so it can get you from 4 mana to 6 mana thanks to the Devoted Druid. So that is one of the big reasons why this card is good in this shell specifically. But I don't think this card would be very good in like normal like Karn or even Hive Mind shells, because it doesn't really increase your threat density, because it's like an 8 mana threat. That's just so much mana in Modern. It just doesn't seem like it does enough. Just too much. But yeah, I think that covers everything. I think that covers everything that I wanted to cover today. I don't guarantee that there won't be a part 3, because it's possible that there will be, because, you know, Amulet will probably continue evolving and new cards will come up, and I will, of course, just be testing bad versions of this deck to try to make it better, and then fail and go back to what I love playing. But sometimes the things that we test actually work out. Sometimes the things that we test on this stream actually work out. A good example right here. and good example right there too. So so yeah, I hope that you enjoyed this informative stream / trip through memory lane, and yeah, hopefully if you enjoy the content, there's not gonna be any gameplay today, but I will be back next Monday with some modern content for sure. We will definitely be analyzing how many Hogak decks were in the top 8 of SCG, the SCG event this weekend, that kind of fun stuff. And then we will probably be, I mean, Hogak won't be banned by then, so we will probably be playing the Druid list, which again I believe is the best one against Hogak. So, have you played against humans with a devoted list? Have I? I honestly don't remember. You can check the archives, but I don't think I have. What is your opinion on Lotus Field? I think it's very good as one of. I think it's unplayable. I think it's really, really bad, and I think people are very, very much undervaluing or underestimating. There you go. Underestimating the cost of sacrificing 2 lands. So I would say, I personally think that the card is unplayable. It's strictly worse in our deck than any bounce land, and it's strictly worse than any other land as well. So I don't think it's going to be playable. I think that you can build the deck, however. I think that you can build the deck in order to make it okay. What that will require is for you to be playing like main deck, ramming up the excavator / crucibles and stuff like that, because that is literally the only way that we can kind of like undo the damage, if that makes sense, undo the damage that the sack 2 lands think will do. So I think that you can brew a version of the deck that can fit the card. I think that version of the deck will be worse than this or this. So yeah, so that is what I think about the Lotus Field card. I was trying to remember, I can't figure out what to side in and out versus them against humans with Druid. How would I sideboard against humans? I mean, I would definitely want these cards, I would want these cards, and I would want this card. Maybe this will be a maybe. So I'm going to take out 6 cards. So I would do 1, 2, 3, 4. Probably I would take out the Vizier package, the Druid. Finale sounds so bad against humans. Yeah, it would be very weird to sideboard against humans actually. Because I honestly don't. I think that you actually want to side out like prime times instead of pacts with this version, which is super weird. Yeah, that's super awkward. No, I think that the Druid package is actually fine, and they are probably going to, like, their meddling mages are probably gonna like insta name Primal Titan anyway. So yeah, you're right, it would be super awkward to sideboard against humans, because you kind of have to keep, I think you kind of have to keep the Druid package, but you also don't, like, Finale sounds terrible against humans, and also Pact sounds terrible. Yeah, it's super awkward. That's a nice little puzzle to solve right there. I hadn't really thought about this. I think I would start there, though. I think I would take out these 5 cards. And then I want to bring in 6 cards, so I would take out probably 1 Finale. It's super weird, yeah. You don't want to leave Steerings to find explosives. So Steerings does find explosives, but Steerings is so bad against Thalia. Paying 2 mana for Steerings makes it very fair. Makes it very, very fair. So I think I would sideboard something like this. I would take this out, and I would bring this 6 in. And I would just, like... Well, I guess that... Yeah, no, yeah, I think I don't want Sage, because I think that Damping Sphere becomes much worse against you when you're playing Devoted Druid. Yeah, for sure, for sure. Yeah, so I don't think I would want Rex Sage against humans with this version of the deck. So I think I would do plus this 6 minus this 6. Yep, that's what I would do. Yep, so that's gonna be it for me today then. I will be back again, as I was saying earlier, on Monday. And of course, if you have any questions that I didn't get to, some people were asking about, you know, like going over how to mulligan and like how to sequence stuff. I already covered that in the first video, and then I made another video that is named how to sideboard with Amulet Titan. So I cover all of those topics in how to cyber no how to mulligan with Amulet Titan. Sorry. So I covered all of those topics in those videos already, so it didn't make sense for me to like talk about that stuff again. If you want to know about what to sideboard, I recently created a sideboard guide that is exclusive for my sideboard subscribers, for my Twitch subscribers. So if you want to get access to it, all you need to do is subscribe using that link over there, and then you need to join my Discord, which you can do with that link over there. And after that, you just link your Twitch account to your Discord account, and voila, you will get access to the sub only channels in my Discord, and that's where you will find the sideboard guide for this version of the deck. If you want to, of course, with the subscription, you will also get access to these sweet emotes. And if you have a tier 2 subscription, you also get access to the No Bad Matchups emote, which is, I think it's my favorite emote. It's just such a great meme, right? Like the No Bad Matchups, so good. Then if you want to follow me on Twitter, always down. If anybody has any Amulet related questions or whatever related questions, you can always reach me at fpublishmtg. If you want to check out this stream and all of my previous streams, you can find them in my YouTube channel right there. Finally, if you want to help support the stream, you can do so by donating using that link over there. Any donation of $12, with any donation of $12 or more, I will play whichever list you want on stream live, so you can check out the action. And then of course we will do like a deck tech and speak of possible changes that we could have afterwards. And finally, let's try to figure out. Oh yeah, one last thing is like I'm trying to go to GP Vegas, so any donation that you do from now until August something will go towards helping me reach my goal in order to go to GP Vegas. Let's see who's streaming some Modern that we can host. Nobody's streaming Modern, but Eric though, Eric is playing some Legacy, so yep, let's do some of that. Let's do some Legacy. Alright, let's go to Eric's stream. See you all over there, and have an amazing rest of your day. Bye bye.